Chapter 102. Ever since Rondo left. Actually, before Rondo left, the Celtics' record wasn't very good either. After Rondo left, the Celtics' record seemed to have gotten worse. Other than their home win against the Timberwolves, they had already suffered 2 consecutive defeats. They lost to the Heat and the Magic, who also had a poor record. The Celtics were no longer a strong team in the league, so the Christmas war that everyone was looking forward to had nothing to do with them. However, it was still one of the faces of the NBA, so a game was arranged to be held on the night of the carnival. That night they would be playing against the Brooklyn Nets. Although the Nets were bad now, they were much better than the Celtics on paper. If it was a normal team without a top player, they would have to think of a way to suck or make a trade. However, the Celtics didn't have such a tradition. Even if they were to lose to death, they would never play badly. Therefore, the team still had the energy to fight for victory. Skill level was skill level and ambition was ambition. It wasn't their style to admit defeat before the game started. When Jiang Hai arrived at the training ground, he was surprised to find that although the record wasn't good, the team's atmosphere was good. At this time, the team's players were gathered in groups of 3 to 5 on the large training ground. Some were practicing shooting, some were practicing inside the three-point line, some were practicing hitting, grabbing rebounds, blocking positions, and the like. The NBA training ground wasn't a small place with only one basketball court. When Jiang Hai arrived, he saw that there were 10 basketball racks, which meant that there were 5 basketball courts. There was a lot of empty space next to each basketball court. There were many boys standing next to the wall in the distance. They wore the same clothes and looked young. They were mainly responsible for picking up the bouncing basketballs. Sometimes they were also responsible for defending and passing the ball. These people should be the legendary ball boys. Among them, Jiang Hai saw a familiar figure. It should be the guy who played one-on-one with him on the basketball court. He seemed to be called John, but it was John in white. "Oh, you're here. Come, Jiang, follow him over there. I've arranged a shooting trainer for you. They'll evaluate your various abilities. I've heard Bradley talk about your godly shooting skills. Show us." When he saw Jiang Hai and Bradley coming over, Brad Stevens immediately looked at Jiang Hai and spoke to him. As his voice fell, 2 coaches came over and took Jiang Hai to the half of the empty court next to them. "How is he?" Watching Jiang Hai being taken away by the 2 coaches, Brad Stevens pulled Avery and Bradley aside and asked in a low voice. Hearing his words, Bradley could not help but feel a little hesitant. "I'll give you a reminder. You can call him a monster." It went straight to the empty basket. Then 2 steps, 3 steps. 1.5 meters away from the basket, it was still an empty basket. Seeing this scene, Brad Stevens felt a little confused. Could it be that what Bradley said was true? At this time, more people also noticed Jiang Hai, who was practicing shooting in the distance. The terrifying 3-point shot was really terrifying. We seem to have found a monster. At this time, Brian Bowe came in from the outside, took a form and handed it to Brad Stevens. Seeing the form handed over by Brian Bowe, Brad Stevens's hand suddenly trembled, and then he looked at the guy who was losing 3 points in the half-court period with a horrified look. "Are you sure you didn't write it wrong?" Looking at Brian Bowe's form, Brad Stevens said with a puzzled look. "I swear to God." Hearing what Brad Stevens said, Brian Bowe also said with a serious face. "Hiss, if this is true, then this guy is really a monster, a super monster." Looking at the information in front of him, Brad Stevens's eyes were about to spit fire. Then he glanced at Jiang Hai, who continued to shoot there. He thought for a moment. He now saw Jiang Hai's shooting ability, but he still didn't know how good his shooting ability was under defense, so he wanted to try it. Thinking of this, he put the information aside for the time being, and then he clapped his hands hard. "Everyone gather here first, let's play a 15-minute team practice game." Hearing Brad Stevens's words, the eyes of the people who were going to watch Jiang Hai practice shooting 3-pointers were attracted. Hearing the head coach's instructions, everyone did not dare to neglect. After all, there was no real boss on this team, so naturally Brad's prestige was the strongest on the team. "Jiang, you come here too. Let me explain. We are going to have a 15-minute 5-on-5 game. Your performance will determine your playing time tonight." Looking at the people in front of him, Brad said with a serious face. At present, the Celtics have signed a total of 15 players. In addition to the veterans Gerald Wallace, Marcus Thornton, and James Young who can't play because of injuries, there are 12 people who can play. Among these 12 people, there is no absolute saying who is the main force and who is the substitute. Whoever plays well may be the main force, whoever plays poorly may also be the substitute. When it came to the timing of their appearance, the faces of these people instantly became serious. Jared, Salinger, Evan Turner, Avery, Bradley, Tyler Zeller, Jeff Green, your team change into a white vest. J. Claude, Kelly Olynyk, Marcus Smart, Brandon Bass, and Jiang, you guys change into a yellow vest. At the end of his speech, Brad suddenly paused and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing that there was something for him to do, Jiang Hai was a little surprised, but he did not say much. He just changed into a vest. Although he was not interested in playing in the NBA or playing professionally, since he said he wanted to come over to have fun, he naturally would not give up halfway. He went to the side to change into a vest and briefly communicated with his teammates. Are you playing the power forward or the power forward? The point guard of the yellow team, Marcus Smart, walked to Jiang Hai's side and asked him. Marcus Smart was the 6th rookie in the first round this year. The reason why the Celtics traded Rondo was mainly because of him. Although this guy looked like a prick, he had a very good personality. He was willing to do anything on the court to help the team. He was not the same kind of person as the current point guards who focused on offense. His defense was above average and his offense was above average. He was very active in grabbing rebounds, and his ability to draw fouls was not bad. Most importantly, he had a heart that wanted to win. Even if it was just a mock competition, he wanted to win. He did not want to lose. The power forward. After thinking about it, although Jiang Hai's height was more suitable to play the power forward, Jiang Hai was very clear that although he had played with his dribbling at home for the past 2 days, it was limited to jogging and would not be broken. If he wanted to run or step over, it was better not to think about it. Under such circumstances, it was better to play the power forward. That's fine. In a while you will stand in the position you are familiar with. I will pass the ball to you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marcus Smart smiled at Jiang Hai. Then the 10 people walked on the court and prepared for today's practice game. Chapter 103. The white team did not have a true point guard, so Avery and Bradley was going to play the point guard, Evan Turner was the second, Jeff Green was the third, Tyler Zeller was the fourth, and Jared Salinger was the fifth. On the yellow team, Marcus Smart was the point guard, Jiang Hai was the second, J. Claude was the third, Brandon Bass was the fourth, and Kelly Olynyk was the fifth. Compared to the white team, the yellow team was obviously a substitute team. Although the current Celtics did not have an obvious main player or substitute, it was easy to tell who was more famous in this team. Currently, the most famous player on the team should be Gerald Wallace. However, because this daredevil worked too hard in the past, he aged very quickly. The original all-star player was now completely reduced to a substitute and a water cooler guard. He was covered in injuries and it was not easy for him to recover. Apart from him, the most famous player was Jamil Nelson, who was once an all-star player in Orlando. However, after coming to the Celtics as a bargaining chip in the trade for Rajon Rondo, he understood that it was no longer his era. He was probably only going to be a third substitute here, not much different from when he was with the Mavericks. Apart from these two, basically all the other big names were on the white team. Jeff Green was one of the 3 young masters of the Thunder. Avery and Bradley was the current boss of the team. Evan Turner was once the core of the Sixers. Of course, he did not become a core player in the end, but at least he was once a boss. With such a team, it should not be a problem to beat Jiang Hai's yellow team. As the 2 teams played the jump ball, Olynyk, a hard-working Caucasian, was not as athletic as Salinger, who was once comparable to Andre Drummond, the core player of the Pistons. So the jump ball was easily sent to the white team. After Avery and Bradley received the ball, they slowly pushed across the half court. The point guards of the 2 teams were the type that lacked offense but had enough defense, so Bradley was not in a hurry to attack. Instead, he first played his advantage, the point guard. As the ball was passed to Jeff Green from the waist position, Jeff Green also tried to lean on J. Claude behind him. Even though J. Claude had already defended very seriously, Jeff Green still leaned on him and used him as a fulcrum to turn and slide into the inside line. Olynyk saw him come in and hesitated for a moment. He did not go up to defend because he was the only one inside at that moment. If he went up to defend and Jeff Green passed the ball, he would be in trouble. Under such circumstances, Jeff Green naturally did not hold back. With a light one-handed dunk, the ball went into the basket. 2 points, the white team was in the lead. Seeing Kelly Olynyk's performance, Brad Stevens also noted something on his tactical board, but at that moment, no one had the time or leisure to look at him. When the white team's offense ended, it was the yellow team's turn. This time, Marcus Smart and Brandon Bass did a pick and roll to attract the opponent's change of defense in the lane and then passed the ball to Brandon Bass. Brandon Bass was also a very strange player. He was also a veteran player and had been in the league for 10 years. However, as a black man, he did not rely on his weight, his athletic talent, or his defense to stay in the league. Instead he relied on his mid-range shooting. Apart from the first 2 years when he was with the Hornets, the team that was now renamed the Pelicans, he had some stumbling when he played there. Then, when he came to the Mavericks, he just happened to be in the Mavericks' most glorious period. As Nowitzki's substitute, he practiced a decent mid-range shot. Then, when he came to the Magic, he gradually made a name for himself. Then he joined the Celtics and was considered a rotation point for the main force in the team. He usually played as a substitute, but also as a main force. It mainly depended on the opponent's situation. If the opponent's inside lane was too heavy to defend, then he would play as the main force. If the opponent's inside lane was very flexible, then he would play as a substitute. He could be considered a player who could do anything with one move. Now, after receiving the pass from Marcus Smart, facing Avery and Bradley's defense, he did not need to worry too much because of his height advantage. He received the ball and dodged to the side. Then he jumped straight up and threw the ball. The ball hit the inside of the basket and bounced into the net. The score on both sides was 2-2. Attacking again, Avery and Bradley prepared to pass the ball to Jeff Green with the intention of attacking the strong points. However, he unexpectedly found that Evan Turner, who was standing in front of Jiang Hai, was asking for the ball with his hand open. Seeing this scene, Avery and Bradley was stunned for a moment. Then he hesitated. It was not that he was unwilling to pass the ball to Evan Turner, but because he knew how strong Jiang Hai's defense was. Evan Turner did not know, but he knew very well. That was why he did not pass the ball to Evan Turner, who seemed to be stronger. However, Evan Turner did not understand. He was now asking for the ball with his hand open. After hesitating for a moment, Avery and Bradley still passed the ball to him. He did this to protect Evan Turner's face and also to let Jiang Hai show his strength. As for whether Evan Turner would explode, after receiving the ball, Evan Turner pressed his body down and looked at Jiang Hai in front of him with a serious face. He did not talk trash. In fact, in the Celtics, other than a few old hooligans, there were not many people who liked to talk trash. Finally, Evan Turner moved. As he slammed the basketball on the ground, he also moved in an instant and broke through to Jiang Hai's left side. However, just as he was about to move, he unexpectedly found that Jiang Hai had already appeared in front of him. However, this had long been expected. He changed his center of gravity in an instant and dribbled the ball. At the same time, he was ready to break through to the right side. However, at this time, Jiang Hai appeared again and firmly blocked in front of him. This breakthrough by force. One change of direction was not Evan Turner's limit, but at this time he was not prepared to do too many moves. His physical fitness was not very good. He was really not very good at changing directions at the last minute. Fortunately, he thought that in a situation where he had the advantage in terms of strength and height, breaking through by force might be a good choice. Therefore, he forced his way to the inside of the three-point line. However, when his body leaned against Jiang Hai's body, the powerful force even forced him to take a step. This kind of strength really made him a little scared. However, as an NBA starter, he still had his own ability. Although he was almost stopped by the collision, he did not stop. Instead, he continued to hold the ball and moved forward. 1 step, 2 steps. He had already reached about 2 o'clock of the free throw point. He forcefully carried Jiang Hai and wanted to break through. However, would Jiang Hai give him such a chance? As he jumped, Jiang Hai jumped as well. Evan Turner only felt his vision blur. In the next second, half of Jiang Hai's body appeared in front of him. Because he had just wrestled with Jiang Hai, he did not jump high. At this time, his line of sight was almost parallel to Jiang Hai's chest. How was he going to shoot? Jiang Hai gave him a very good choice, and that was not to shoot. Under Evan Turner's surprised gaze, Jiang Hai's right hand instantly pressed on the basketball between his raised hands. As Jiang Hai's right arm exerted force, a huge force came through. But none of these people believed him at that time. Now, facts speak louder than words, and he didn't need to say anything more. Then, how do we defend against this? Hearing Avery and Bradley's words, Evan Turner couldn't help but hesitate and said to him. Hearing what he said, Avery and Bradley shrugged and then pointed to Brad Stevens on the sidelines. His meaning was very clear. Don't ask me, ask the boss. Seeing his appearance, Evan Turner sighed. It seems that I'm going to suffer today. It turned out that his guess was quite correct. He was indeed going to suffer. Smart attacked again, and Smart seemed to recognize Jiang Hai's point. He passed the ball again and Jiang Hai didn't let him down. He caught the ball from a long distance and easily hit it. After 4 consecutive shots, Evan Turner had to go around and directly prevent Jiang Hai from catching the ball. However, he could prevent Jiang Hai from catching the ball, but he could just go inside the three-point line. With a flash, he rushed inside the three-point line. Smart saw Jiang Hai running and making gestures at the same time. Without saying anything, he directly hung the ball inside the three-point line. After all, this ball was a little far away, so it was hung a little high. However, for Jiang Hai, it didn't matter how high it was because he could get it no matter how high it was. Suddenly, under everyone's gaze, Jiang Hai jumped straight into the air and blocked Marcus Smart's pass at an absolute height. In an instant, his lower abdomen tightened. It felt as if Jiang Hai had stopped in the air. Before Zeller could react, he calmly dunked the ball into the basket. Wow, this is the first time I know that assists are so easy to get. The balls that were given to Jiang Hai were all given out by him. As a point guard, this was the first time Smart realized that it was so easy to be an assistant. If he played a game with Jiang Hai, would it be possible to break Stockton's NBA assist record? Thinking of this, his eyes became brighter and brighter, and Brad Stevens' eyes on the sidelines became even brighter. Sign him. No matter what, we have to sign him. Even if we give him a mid-level contract, we have to sign him. Just sign him for 1 year. Even if we give him the highest salary next year, it doesn't matter. We have to sign him. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was having fun and smiling brightly on the court, Brad Stevens' expression didn't change, but in fact, his hands in his pockets were trembling. In a while, sort out the video of this game. I want to use it. Looking at the stunned assistant coach on the sidelines, Stevens whispered. Hearing Stevens' words, the assistant coach was stunned for a moment, then nodded to show that he understood. This training game that followed was almost all for Jiang Hai. By the time Jiang Hai left the court, he had already played a full quarter of the game, 12 minutes. Although Xiao Fei didn't want Sanjiang to be first or second, if everyone felt that this book was okay, please vote for Sanjiang. If it stayed in the last place, no one would be proud, right? Chapter 105. The composition of an NBA team was not inferior to that of a large multinational corporation. It was not much different. In addition to the boss and the board of directors, the responsibilities of the club were also extremely strict. The general manager, the deputy general manager, the scouting department, the finance department, the publicity department, the internal affairs department, the legal department, the marketing department, the human resources department. It could be said that there were hundreds of people in the surrounding departments that were formed around the basketball team. This did not include the surrounding departments such as the security inside the stadium, the people in charge of the surrounding shops, and the people who managed the small vendors, etc. In addition to these non-basketball people, there were many people related to basketball. The scouting department mentioned earlier was naturally one of them. The scouting department was generally planned under the general manager or the head coach. It depended on who had more say in the team, the manager or the head coach. If it was the Lakers, it would probably be under the general manager. If it was the Spurs, it would definitely be under the head coach. After all, Brad Stevens was still young for the current Celtics, so it was under the general manager, Danny Ainge. As for how many people there were in the scouting department, it was uncertain. However, there would be at least 6 or 7 official scouts, plus their assistants. After all, the people they were in charge of were different. Some of them were in charge of the NCAA in the Western United States, the Central United States, and the Eastern United States. Some were in charge of high schools, some were in charge of low-level leagues, and some were in charge of overseas, Europe, Asia, South America, Australia, etc. The NBA placed a lot of emphasis on scouting. After all, what was the most important thing in this era? It was talent. In addition to the scouts, there were also many nutritionists in the cafeteria. Naturally, there were also many assistant coaches. It was like playing a game. Sometimes, a head coach would even have as many as a dozen assistant coaches. First of all, there had to be a first assistant coach responsible for arranging and practicing the tactics that the head coach had prepared. Next, there was an offensive tactics coach, a defensive tactics coach, and a fitness coach. These were the 3 most basic coaches. Under these coaches, there was also a shooting coach, an offensive coach under the basket, a positioning coach, a defensive drill coach, and so on. The fitness coach was also divided into basic fitness coach, strength coach, assault coach, and so on. In addition, there was also a team doctor. All in all, the NBA club was a huge organization. It was not as simple as what Jiang Hai had seen on TV. He had such a strong performance and he was only going to give him a short contract for 10 days? To use a phrase often seen in domestic NBA forums, Jiang Hai felt insulted. Yes, you're right. Yes, I think you know your situation better than us. You are not a registered player in the players' union, so we need to help you register. Secondly, you have not received formal training, and you are already 27 years old. You don't have much potential to speak of. But since you can sit in front of me, That means you have proven yourself with your strength. You can stay. I am willing to believe in Brad, so we are willing to give you this opportunity. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Danny Ainge said without changing his expression. Ahem, maybe Bradley did not make things clear to you. First, I'm used to being lazy. I came today just to test the limits of my body, so I have no intention of joining you. Second, even if I wanted to join, I would not sign a short contract for 10 days. Don't worry, let me finish. I'm not an Asian teenager with dreams. Living for basketball, dying for basketball, fighting for basketball for a lifetime, and so on, that is not my original intention. I am a manor owner. My manor is in the suburbs of Boston, in Winthrop. It is a huge manor that gathers a ranch, a fishing farm, and a winery. Looking at Danny Ainge in front of him, Jiang Hai said indifferently. I just spent $280 million to buy this manor this year. I'm not saying this to show that I am rich. I know that compared to some famous stars or team owners, $280 million is not a big deal. But I just want to tell you that I am not short of money. So, I think our conversation about the contract can end here. Clearing his throat, Jiang Hai looked at Danny Ainge and said very seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Danny Ainge was also stunned. This was the first time he had seen such an amazing rookie. What was this guy thinking? Although I feel sorry, our conversation may have to end here. But Danny Ainge was not a little guy who had just entered society. Pretending to be tough with him, could you be tougher than him? Well, he thought Jiang Hai was pretending. But Jiang Hai did not say anything about this. He just stood up, shook hands with him, and left his office. Although he was in a bad mood after coming out, overall, Jiang Hai was still quite happy today. At least he knew where his limits were. After coming out of Danny Ainge's office, he did not go back to Avery and Bradley or Brad Stevens to talk about this. Instead, he went directly to the parking lot downstairs. There, the Turner brothers had been waiting for a long time. Hey bro, how was it? Did they sign you? As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, John immediately asked Jiang Hai. Oh. Shrugging his shoulders, Jiang Hai didn't elaborate. It was quite shameful to talk about it. He was a billionaire, but someone threw a 10-day contract in his face. He really couldn't afford to lose this face. That's a pity. But bro, with your physical fitness, it would be even more of a pity if you signed. With your physical fitness, you should play rugby. Looking at Jiang Hai, John immediately said. Well, it seems that his true love is rugby. Well, let's go back. He opened the door of his F-650 and sat in the driver's seat. Then, under the envious eyes of John and Louis, he stepped on the accelerator and the car sped toward the exit of the parking lot. That's the car a man should drive. Looking at Jiang Hai's back, Louis muttered in a low voice. Well bro, with your salary you can forget about it in your life. Hearing Louis's sigh, John couldn't help but pour cold water on him, and then got into the passenger seat of Louis's car with a smile. Hearing his brother's words, Louis could not help but smack his lips. Yes, with my current salary I can forget about it. He lowered his head helplessly, got into the car, then stepped on the accelerator and sped toward the exit. Just as Jiang Hai and others left in the office building, Brad Stevens took a laptop and walked into Danny Ainge's office excitedly, but when he found that the office was empty, he couldn't help but be stunned. Danny, where is Jiang? Looking at Danny Ainge in front of him, Brad Stevens asked with some surprise. Although I don't know the strength of the person you and Avery like, his character is really not suitable to be a player. When I put the contract in front of him, he was not satisfied and left directly. Shrugging, Danny Ainge said with a smile. Oh, who the hell, you should have kept him, he is the new god of basketball, my god. Hearing Danny Ainge's words, even Brad couldn't help but swear. He threw down the laptop in his hand and left in a hurry. Is it necessary? Seeing Brad's gaffe, Danny Ainge couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, then he laughed at himself. The new god of basketball? He didn't think that the new god of basketball would look like a Wuxia. Then he saw Brad put down the laptop and there seemed to be a video on it. Out of curiosity, Danny Ainge clicked on the play button. Chapter 106. Hey boss, how was it? Did they sign you? Driving back to his manor, Jiang Hai got out of the car and saw Rabinsi and the others coming from the warehouse in the distance. It seemed that they had just cleared the snow. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Rabinsi asked with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. They gave me a short 10-day contract. I'm not crazy, I'll sign that. Hearing what Rabinsi said, Jiang Hai said angrily. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Rabinsi and the others also laughed. Jiang Hai really didn't need to go. By the way, boss, AI Dehua is looking for you. After chatting for a while, Jiang Hai was ready to go back. As for Louis and John, they also had to go home. Their female companions were still waiting for them at home. But just as Jiang Hai was about to leave, Robinsi suddenly said to Jiang Hai. Not long after Jiang Hai left, Edward Anderson came over. He didn't say anything and only said that he would call him when Jiang Hai came back. Okay, ask him to come to my house. Hearing Robinsi's words, Jiang Hai nodded. In fact, even if Edward Anderson didn't say it, Jiang Hai probably knew why he came to find him. It was nothing more than two things: fishing and fish farming. To be honest, Edward Anderson's position in this manner was the most awkward. Because others had their own things to do, but he had nothing to do after patrolling the fishing ground every day. This made the old fisherman feel that he took Jiang Hai's money but did nothing. He felt uneasy and didn't want to do anything. Therefore, he always wanted to find something for himself to do. He had to admit that sometimes people were very strange. For some people, he was happy to be paid all day long and not do anything. For example, Jiang Hai in the past. However, some people, such as Edward Anderson, had to do something once they were paid. Otherwise, they would feel uncomfortable all over. Less than 10 minutes after Jiang Hai returned to his room, Edward Anderson, who smelled of the sea, walked in from outside. Hey boss, I heard you went to the Celtics to be a player. How's it going? As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Edward Anderson, who had changed his shoes outside, said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai helplessly threw a beer at him and said in a bad mood, Don't mention it. Have a seat. What do you want? It's like this, boss. I want to ask if you have any plans to raise fish this year. After receiving the beer that Jiang Hai threw over, Ai Dehua didn't rush to open it. Instead, he put the beer on the table and asked Jiang Hai somewhat awkwardly. Well, I can't say that I don't have any plans, but it depends on the funds. Thinking about the money left in his bank account, Jiang Hai rubbed his temples helplessly. When could he say that money was just a string of numbers? It's already January. If you want to raise fish this year, you have to speed it up. Of course, if you don't want to raise fish now, you can still get some income from the fish farm. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson also sighed. He knew that Jiang Hai had invested more money in the ranch, which was more profitable, so the plan for the fish farm would naturally be delayed. However, now that he heard Jiang Hai's words, he also felt a little helpless. Actually, no one will go against the Green Franklin, right? But I remember hearing you say that if we raise fish in the fish farm, it will cost at least tens of millions of dollars. But with me, apart from the tax that needs to be paid in April, I can only use about $10 million. This money is not enough. After hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shrug helplessly. For him, it was great to be able to make a lot of money, but the problem now was that he didn't have enough money. Jiang Hai didn't have the strength to manage bank loans and so on. He didn't want to owe anyone money, even if it was the government. Actually, if we raise fish, we don't have to raise so many at the beginning. The tens of millions I mentioned is the price of raising fish in saturated conditions. If we are not saturated, it won't be too troublesome. And if you have some shortage of money, we can make up for it with the sea we have now, Edward Anderson immediately said when he saw that Jiang Hai wanted to raise fish. What do you mean? Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai looked at him with some surprise. The most expensive cost of raising fish, in addition to the money for the fry, is to build a natural environment and food chain suitable for their growth. But in the past few months, I have been checking the situation of our fish farm. I found that the original food chain in our fish farm is quite stable. We only need to plant more seaweed and then introduce some Arctic shrimp, crabs, cuttlefish and octopus, and it will be enough to raise millions of cod fry, Ai Dehua said immediately when he saw Jiang Hai asking him. It takes at least 5 to 7 years for a cod fry to grow into an adult, which is to say to reach the state of sexual maturity. If it was in the south, it would only take 3 to 4 years, but this is the north, so there is no other way. But if it only reaches the state where it can be sold for money, raising it for a year is about the same. The size of a yearling cod, if it is adequately nourished and there are no natural predators, it is not a problem for it to grow to about 20 centimeters, and such a cod is about a pound. Based on the current price of fish, a pound of cod was about 2 yuan. With a few million fish, the annual income would be close to 10 million yuan. There was no need to think about making money, but they would not lose too much. Most importantly, this was only the first year. Because the construction of the food chain had cost too much, in the second year, just the cost of labor and fish hatchlings would be enough to make a profit. If the heavens opened their eyes, they would be able to turn a profit after 3 years of peace. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai can't help but smack his lips. If there was no profit from the ranch, Jiang Hai might have listened to Edward Anderson and raised cod. After all, this kind of fish has a large sales volume. As long as it is raised, there is no need to worry about sales. Most importantly, this fish is easy to raise, has a high survival rate, and is not easy to die. It is the best choice to raise a large number of fish. But now, after hearing Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai does not want to raise this kind of fish, because it is too cheap. Whether it was raising fish or cattle, Jiang Hai wasn't worried about the quality of these animals because he had the support of his blood. Although he was always bleeding, this made him somewhat speechless. He hoped that after leveling up, he would be able to solve this problem. But at least he wasn't helpless. He had a way to kill them, so this gave him the idea that he could raise more dangerous fish. Cod was a safe species, so he didn't like it because it was too cheap. Can we raise some more expensive fish such as tuna, Atlantic salmon, rainbow trout, grouper, and so on? After thinking about it, Jiang Hai recognized that these are the only more expensive edible fish, so he asked Edward. This can't be tuna. This tuna can't be farmed. This thing runs around for its whole life and will die if it is trapped in one place. Atlantic salmon can be farmed, but this kind of fish is a migratory fish. It needs to grow in fresh water for the first 4 years. If we only buy a 4-year-old half cub, the cost will be very high because a 4-year-old Atlantic salmon is actually very valuable. Rainbow trout and Atlantic salmon are the same. We only have the sea and there are no fresh rivers or lakes. This kind of migratory fish is not very easy to farm. Finally, grouper can be farmed, but the price of this thing is not high, about the same as cod. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, AI Dehua analyzed with Jiang Hai. Everyone in the world knew that tuna was expensive, but no one in the world had raised this thing because this thing, like some sharks, needed to constantly swim in order to get oxygen, and most importantly, this kind of fish lived in groups. In other words, to raise tuna, one must first have a large enough body of water to let these fish swim continuously in order to get oxygen, but the oxygen in this body of water was fixed, and if one raised too much, they would suffocate to death. It was also impossible to get oxygen in the sea. If one raised too little, there would not be enough money to raise the fish, so far no one had raised this thing at all. It was said that Japan was now raising it, but no one knew the progress of raising it. As for salmon and rainbow trout, everyone knew that this kind of fish was very valuable, especially wild ones, but the problem was in front of them. How to raise migratory fish. Directly raising them in the sea, the cost was too high. If they didn't raise them, where could they find a river to raise small fish? These were all problems. Finally, the grouper, this thing's range was too wide. There were expensive ones and there were also cheap ones. The cheap ones were like gold grouper, green grouper, gentian grouper, pearl gentian, and so on. They were all very cheap, and even the price was not much different from cod. The expensive ones were like tiger grouper, eastern star grouper, and these were all expensive. However, eastern star grouper could only be raised in the southern Indian Ocean. This was a tropical fish, and the same was true for tiger grouper, a tropical fish. As for the most expensive mouse grouper, it was not a grouper but a perch family. Its scientific name was humpback perch. Although this kind of fish could also be raised, its survival rate was quite low. Now, many people raised this fish as an ornamental fish. It could be seen how difficult it was to raise this kind of fish, so for Jiang Hai's proposal, Edward Anderson could only smile awkwardly. He had to admit that sometimes his boss was really whimsical. These fish can't be raised? Alas, although I don't have any prejudice against codfish, this kind of fish can't be sold at a high price. I think you've seen and eaten the cows in our manor. My original intention was to only raise high-grade animals in our manor. I have a feeling that the animals raised in our manor are destined to be extraordinary. Something like codfish that can't be sold at a high price. Alas, think about it, is there anything that is easier to raise and can be sold at a high price? After hesitating for a while, Jiang Hai decided to tell AI Dehua some things. Of course he would not say more. He did not want to be targeted by others. Something that is more valuable, can be sold at a high price, and is considered easy to raise. It seems that there is. Well, let's get to the point. Oh hee hee. Today's 2 chapters were delivered consecutively. Chapter 107. $40 for spotted shrimp, $30 for tiger-striped crab, $100 for king crab, $100 for geoduck, $30 for dragon crab, $12 for red crab, $240 for mozzarella, $40 for Atlantic salmon, $60 to $200 for bluefin tuna, $45 for yellowfin tuna, $65 for big-eye tuna, $100 for mozzarella tuna. Sitting in the car on the way to Boston, Jiang Hai looked at the form in his hand and muttered in a low voice. Edward Anderson, who was driving, glanced at Jiang Hai with a smile, then shook his head gently. Ever since Jiang Hai wanted to raise expensive seafood, he had been studying these things like a demon. He first looked up some information on the internet, then went to the local seafood market to ask about it. Of course, he also asked about Chinese restaurants. What he was muttering now was the data he had researched over the past few days. Of course, the unit was kilograms. In the United States, there was no such thing as kilograms. If it was converted to pounds, Jiang Hai was too lazy to do so. Aquatic products, especially marine products, naturally had different prices depending on location and size. He was talking about the normal average price, not the price of the premium quality. No matter what it was, as long as it was premium quality, the price would be unusually high. Take codfish, which Jiang Hai thought was worthless, as an example. As long as the codfish was more than 1 meter long, it would sell for thousands of dollars a day. If it was more than 1.5 meters, it would sell for tens of thousands of dollars. Normally, the codfish that could be sold were only 30 centimeters long, which was a little more than a caddy. 2 codfish added together would not even weigh 1.5 kilograms. That was the difference. As for the smaller ones, the ultra-low temperature ones could only be sold for 80 cents a pound, while the cold ones could be sold for $1.75 a pound. Jiang Hai had also heard of the term cold for the first time. There were 2 ways to preserve fish. One was to freeze the fish completely at a temperature of -60 degrees Celsius. Although this method would not spoil and was suitable for long-distance transportation, at the same time, it would also destroy the original taste of the fish. Generally speaking, other than large-scale fishing boats, very few fishing boats would do this. Of course, some cheaper fish would also do this. As for chilled fish, it was to use a low temperature to slightly freeze the fish. There was a limit to the freezing time. It could only be kept for 12 days, but if it was sold to the fishmonger on the 11th day, the fishmonger would not accept it. Basically, this kind of fish was caught in the morning and sold in the afternoon. Only then would people buy it. This kind of fish was basically expensive. If the price of a fish was not more than $30, fishermen would not be willing to put it in the cold storage. It should be known that the cold storage was just like the freezer layer of a refrigerator, while the cold storage was like an air conditioning room. The electricity it consumed was like diesel on the sea, which was extraordinarily high. Therefore, Jiang Hai had been looking for expensive sea fish in the market these days. So far, the situation was not bad. In fact, if one wanted to raise fish to make money, the best choice was still codfish. Because Jiang Hai's fish farm was next to Winthrop, it might be faster to sail by boat than by car. Here, after catching fish in the morning, they would sell them. They would definitely be chilled, and a pound could be sold for $1.75. Even if it was a pound per fish, according to Edward Anderson's idea, the survival rate of at least 60% after investing 10 million seedlings in the initial stage. That would be 6 million seedlings, $1.75 per fish, which added up to $10.5 million. Coupled with the income from the fish food, an annual income of $12 million shouldn't be a problem. However, the money invested in the seedlings, the second-year seedlings, the money to build the ecosystem, the money to pay the workers, the diesel for the boat, and so on would be deducted. In total, the investment in the fish farm would be about $30 million. If they were lucky, they would be able to recoup their investment in 3 years, and at least be stable in the 4th year. Almost half of the annual income could be earned. Of course, this half of the income would be taxed. But at least before they recouped their investment, they didn't have to worry about taxes. This was also one of the benefits of the United States. For these farmers and fishermen, they only collected the money they earned and not the money they earned back. According to Edward Anderson's calculations, Jiang Hai still had the money to invest. After all, the money didn't need to be invested all at once. Secondly, Ai Dehua had also recently investigated the underwater situation of Jiang Hai's fish farm. He found that there were definitely a lot of fish under the water. After 10 years of recuperation, Jiang Hai's underwater ecosystem was extremely perfect. The number of fish was considerable. Even though it was winter, there were still a lot of fish under the water. According to Ai Dehua's preliminary estimate, there were about $10 million worth of fish in the water. Of course, this was under the condition that they were all fished out. With $10 million, not to mention supporting the income of the fish farm for the first year, it was enough for Jiang Hai to even pay for all the buildings. According to Edward Anderson, there was nothing wrong with doing this, but Jiang Hai was a little unwilling to accept it. The two of them expressed their helplessness, but they said that they will not give up. Jiang Hai doesn't care if they will give up because it will be New Year's Eve soon. In the United States, there was nothing good about the New Year. It wasn't as interesting as Christmas. The major competitions didn't give off the feeling of being the focus of attention. Only some TV stations would do some New Year's Eve concerts. If Jiang Hai was in New York, he could go to Times Square to watch the concert and then pick up some girls. Maybe he could even get a kiss at the end of the new year. But obviously he doesn't have the mood to go. So he spent New Year's Eve alone at home. With the arrival of January, the coldest time of the year had arrived in the Boston area. After Belle returned, Robbins and the others had to end their vacation in advance and start to get busy. As for John and Louis, after the new year, they returned to the place where they should go. Although Jiang Hai's manor was very fun, after all, they still had their own things to think about. At the same time, Ai Dehua and Jiang Hai also have something to do. They need to buy water plants. The basic structure of the ecological food chain is that big fish eat small fish eat shrimps, and shrimps eat water plants. In Boston, unless you raise strange fish, you have to put in the fry at the beginning of spring, which is March. The fry need to eat when they go into the sea. Of course, they can be fed at a fixed location, but they also need to hide to avoid being eaten by big fish. So, when the fry are put in, the ecological environment must be built. Water plants, as the most basic part of the food chain, need to be put in first. When the water plants grow for about a month, you will start to put in shrimp, crab, shell, and so on. After these seedlings grow for another month, you will start to put in the fry. However, because the sea is still cold in March, you need to put in a bigger body when you put in the fry. Too small larvae will not do. These are all things to pay attention to. In the past, Jiang Hai was not very clear about it. He has to admit that you are never too old to learn. When Jiang Hai was thinking about what to raise in his heart, the car slowly drove into the port in the center of Boston where Jiang Hai had been before. But this time it went in another direction. Jiang Hai saw a large number of grid boxes from afar. This is the wholesale market of Boston's fry. Today's second update, continuously delivered. There are a few boxes of Atlantic cod here. Although you don't plan to raise this kind of fish, I still have to say that this kind of fish is actually the easiest to earn. Moreover, it's almost guaranteed that you won't lose money. Iron Bull introduced to Jiang Hai as he walked into the grid area behind him. The price of the cod seedlings here was really not expensive. It was about 13 cents per tail. According to the calculation, a mature fish could be sold for $1.75, which was almost a dozen times the profit. After deducting the labor cost and the cost of the bait, one could earn about 90 cents per fish for a year. 1 million fish would be $900,000 and 10 million fish would be $9 million. Raising this kind of fish could indeed make a profit without making a loss, but in Jiang Hai's view, the scope was too small and not suitable for him to develop. This is a herring. It's a type of fish that can be raised with cod, but it doesn't grow big. It's like a gift from Santa Claus. It's a surprise no matter how many there are. After walking past the most cod ponds, they arrived at the bottom ponds. The herring seedlings in the ponds were smaller than the cod. After all, the fish itself did not grow very big. The largest was about 30 centimeters. Unlike cod, which could live for a long time and grow big, this kind of fish was basically a set with cod. When raising cod, they would more or less raise some herring. The economic value of this kind of fish was similar to that of cod. It could be sold for money or it could be used as rations for cod. Of course, the most important thing was that its sales were large and there was no need to worry about sales at all. The price of this kind of fish was 8 cents per tail. After all, it could also be used as rations, so it was not expensive. This is the Maine lobster pond and this is the emperor crab pond. I specially imported them from Asian island countries, but they are not very easy to raise. This is the bamboo shrimp, which came with this kind of crab. Although the taste is good and the price is good, it is also not very easy to raise. This is the oyster pond. I have almost all the oysters in the world here. This is the high prestige oyster, produced in Ireland. This is the king of oysters, the Ghidorah oyster. This is the best oyster. If it grows well, it can be sold for $20 in a Western restaurant. I heard that they will sell it for about $10. These damn Western restaurants. After walking through the cod and herring pond, Jiang Hai saw a crustacean purse net in front of him. The things in the purse net made Jiang Hai's eyes light up. Needless to say, the Maine lobster was a representative species of Maine and the Boston area. Although the local price was not high, Jiang Hai had always wanted to raise them. It was just that he had not dived into the water these days, so Jiang Hai was not sure if his territory was suitable for raising these things. If it was suitable, he would raise a few. Although eating lobster was despised by others in China and was said to be a nouveau riche, Jiang Hai was now a nouveau riche, so he wanted to eat them. In addition to the lobster, he also saw other valuable things that he had investigated, such as the emperor crab. The emperor crab and the emperor crab were not the same kind of crab. The emperor crab actually referred to the Kanshaka stone crab, which belonged to the stone crab family. The emperor crab's scientific name was the giant pseudoliteral crab, which belonged to the crab family. It was easy to distinguish from its appearance. The emperor crab was a spider crab, a killer crab, the kind with particularly long legs. It looked more like a spider than a crab. The emperor crab, on the other hand, was an enlarged crab. It was very big, quite big. People in Europe and America would not eat the killer crab, but they liked the emperor crab very much. However, the price of this guy was also very good. The average price of 1 kilogram was about $100, and a grown emperor crab weighed at least 10 kilograms. In other words, one crab could be sold for more than $1,000, and this was when it was bought raw. If it was cooked in a Western restaurant, it would be even more expensive. And this kind of crab was so expensive that it could be ignored. Many seafood restaurants did not dare to buy it. They were afraid that it would die after being raised in the restaurant, or that no one would order it. After all, one crab could cost tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. In the current situation in China, without people with 2 mouths to feed, there were not many people who could afford to eat it. Although the bamboo shrimp was not as expensive as the spotted shrimp, if it was raised, 1 kilogram could be sold for about $20. Among the seafood, it was a pretty good price. Of course, the most expensive clam was the geoduck clam, which was also available here. As for the oysters, which were very popular in Europe and America, Jiang Hai was a little confused. This was because he also ate oysters in China. However, oysters should be very cheap. The smaller restaurants in China or in the night market sold oysters for $1, $2 each. He really could not understand why an oyster could be sold for $20. Was it robbery? In addition to these things, there were many other kinds of shellfish here. These were also the fish food that Jiang Hai wanted to buy in the future. There were all kinds of clams, and clams. Well, it was not called that in the United States. But the things here were the same. Along the way, Jiang Hai also looked at the things here. The things here were indeed very complete, and there were even abalones. However, for things like abalones, ordinary small abalones were not worth much. They were sold in the domestic seafood market for a few dozen per kilogram. The bigger ones were sold in some seaside cities for more than $10 per abalone. Those truly precious abalones were top-notch. The so-called top-notch did not refer to how many heads the abalones had, but how many abalones there were in a caddy. The so-called two-headed abalones meant that 2 abalones weighed a caddy. The price of such abalones could be imagined. The 3-headed abalones were much cheaper than the 2-headed abalones. The abalones that cost dozens of yuan per caddy were estimated to have more than 10 heads. The abalones that cost more than 10 yuan per caddy were estimated to have 7 or 8 heads. Such abalones were not worth much. After walking past these valuable shellfish, they arrived in front of the fish grid. But obviously the fish here were much better than cod and herring. Iron Bull also stopped here and introduced them to Jiang Hai. This fish is much better in the south because it is too cold here. This is a 3-year-old fish. Nominally, it can be directly thrown into the sea, but in fact, it still needs to be raised for a period of time. I heard from AI de Hua that there is no fresh water source in our country, so this fish is not easy to raise. If you want to raise them directly, I recommend these 3 kinds of fish: grouper, giant grouper, and American redfish. Iron Bull looked at Jiang Hai and said seriously. In fact, there were many types of grouper, but if it was just called grouper, it would be tiger grouper because the tiger grouper was the real grouper. The giant grouper was also called dragon grouper in China, and its price was almost the same as grouper, but its size was much larger. Finally, the American redfish was also a fish that Jiang Hai cared about after all. So basically, it needs to be raised for 2 years to sell. The price is about the same, about $30 per kilogram. But the survival rate of this fish is very low. Not only does nature eliminate some of them, but they also kill each other. They need to eat constantly, and the cost is also very high. The survival rate of the fry is less than 40%. Of course, I'm talking about wild breeding. If it is in a cage, it will be relatively higher. Looking at Jiang Hai, Iron Bull slowly introduced. Looking at the grid he pointed at, Jiang Hai hesitated. Today's first update, 2 consecutive updates. Sure enough, after returning to the main plot, the book review section was much calmer. Happy ha. Chapter 109. Logically speaking, it was the most profitable way to raise a fish. A young fish cost $1.15. After 2 years, the cost of a fish was about $50. If it grew to 15 kilograms, it would cost $30 per kilogram, which would be $450 per fish. It seemed like a 9-fold increase, but one fish could earn $400. 100 fish was $40,000, and 1 million fish was $400 million. But to raise 1 million fish based on the survival rate, one would have to buy 3 million fish seedlings. The cost of a seedling was $50, so in total, it would be $150 million. Someone said that it was still very profitable. What if it was $250 million? But it had to be understood that there might be natural or man-made disasters. For example, what if there was a tsunami? Boston was so prone to typhoons. If there was a tsunami, an earthquake, or an oil pipeline in the Pacific Ocean that happened to blow up and hit Jianghai's fish farm, the American government would compensate a part of it, but that was only a part. In the end, Jianghai would still lose everything. This was also why most fishermen in North America were willing to raise cod and herring even though they knew that raising these expensive fish could make money. At least those things were guaranteed. Even if they were to fail this year, there would still be subsidies from the American government so they would not lose too much. Therefore, people who were willing to take the risk to raise these kinds of fish were also rare in the United States. Basically, if they wanted to raise these kinds of fish, they would only raise them in a small area. No one was willing to raise them in a large area. As for the rest of the bream, I won't recommend them to you because these fish are solitary, and it's not easy for you to catch them. Finally, this is the American redfish. This fish has just become popular in recent years, and I heard that it's very popular in China. The price per kilogram of adult fish is about $12, but the price for juvenile fish is 20 cents, which is about the same as codfish, but much more expensive than codfish. It's also easier to raise and grows faster. The biggest fish can grow up to 3 kilograms in a year, and the smallest fish can grow up to more than 1 kilogram. The only troublesome thing is that they eat a lot and are prone to diseases, so they have a high demand for seawater. After introducing the grouper and anchovy, Iron Bull focused on introducing this kind of fish to Jianghai. This kind of fish was also farmed in China. Therefore, Jianghai had some understanding of this fish. Its appearance was similar to yellow croakers and its taste was similar. After all, they were of the same genus, the grouper family. They were considered distant relatives. In the United States and Mexico, this kind of fish was the favorite fish of sea fishermen. It tasted good and was not too fishy, but it was rich in nutrients. It was a very good fish. Recently, this kind of fish was popular in China. Therefore, in the United States, this kind of fish did not have to worry about sales. Most importantly, this kind of fish was easier to raise and the seedlings were cheap. If there was no problem with the water in the fish farm and they did not get sick, the cost of raising a fish was about $2. 1 kilogram was $12. According to raising it for a year, an average of 2 kilograms would be $24. One fish could earn $22. 1 million fish would be $22 million. The survival rate was much higher than the grouper. This kind of fish liked to eat its own kind. This kind of fish did not have such a habit. As long as there was enough food, there would not be a big problem, so when Jianghai heard this, he was also a little biased towards this kind of fish. Can you raise it together? But it was just a suggestion. Jianghai hesitated for a moment and asked him. Hearing Jianghai's words, Iron Bull couldn't help but be stunned. Raise it together? Boss, have you really decided? Getting in the car, Ai Dehua looked at Jianghai and couldn't help but ask hesitantly. Yes, it's decided, so happily. Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jianghai also smiled and said to him. Well, you're the boss. I've never raised a fish like this before. With a helpless sigh, Ai Dehua said inexplicably, because in the end, Jianghai still decided to raise them together. He wanted to raise 3 million American redfish, 200,000 grouper and 200,000 giant grouper, and finally add 50,000 salmon. In addition to these things, he also raised other things such as king crab. This kind of seedling is sold by the ton, $500,000 per ton. Well, Jianghai bought a ton of them, $300,000 per ton. Maine lobster is the cheapest, $20,000 per ton. Jianghai bought 10 tons at one time and prepared to throw them into his ocean together with Haiyu. Fortunately, his fishery was big enough. Otherwise, these things alone would be enough to make the fishery a mess. Jianghai didn't want to waste any more time. Instead, he bought 10 tons of them. Just the money for these seedlings added up to a very considerable income. The American king snapper was 20 cents per fish, so 3 million fish would be $600,000. The grouper was $1 per fish, so a total of 200,000 fish would be $200,000. The anaconda was $1 per fish, so a total of $230,000 would be $200,000. The anaconda was 15 cents per fish, so a total of $230,000 would be $230,000. The king crab was $5 per fish, so 50,000 fish would be $250,000 per fish. Adding the king crab's $500,000, the spotted shrimp's $300,000, and the Maine lobster's $200,000. With just a wave of Jiang Hai's hand he spent $28 million on these seedlings alone. Someone said, didn't they say to build an ecological environment first and then buy fish? Such a large-scale purchase of seedlings. Of course, it is impossible that there is no time to prepare. Originally, according to Iron Bull, Jiang Hai will give him a deposit first, and then he will prepare the seedlings. However, Jiang Hai was too lazy to talk nonsense. Since Ai Dehua said that this person is trustworthy, Jiang Hai directly signed the contract, and then Jiang Hai transferred all the money. Faced with Jiang Hai's tycoon style, Iron Bull was about to go crazy with joy. He had never met such a big customer before. With this deal, apart from the transportation, labor, and the original cost of the seedlings, he can earn at least 300,000 renminbi. This income of 300,000 renminbi is equivalent to several years of selling seedlings. Thinking of this, it would be strange if he was not happy. He immediately patted his chest and promised Jiang Hai that he will bring the best seedlings to Jiang Hai. At the same time he will give Jiang Hai a ton of lobsters, a ton of bamboo prawns, a ton of top-grade Australian abalone, and 2 tons of Ghidorah oysters for free. According to Jiang Hai's calculation, these things added up to almost 100,000 renminbi. Finally, he will give him 5 tons of Arctic sweet prawns. Jiang Hai has to admit that Jiang Hai is very good at doing business. Just these things made Jiang Hai very happy. If he works harder, Jiang Hai will definitely buy from him in the future. This is because Jiang Hai will not only buy seedlings for a year, he does not plan to cultivate seedlings himself. If he wants to catch a big customer like himself, working hard is the only way out. However, after spending the money, Jiang Hai realized that the real money has not been spent yet. Because they bought too many fish, prawns and crabs, Jiang Hai's fish farm's original need for food has increased rapidly. With the increase in food, the amount of food, water and plants also increased rapidly. According to Ai Dehua's calculation, the amount of seaweed seeds was also increasing. Originally, he only needed about 100,000 renminbi of seeds, but now it seems that he has to increase it to 300,000 renminbi. Iron Bull was also in charge of contacting the sea bath company, but the matters of the phone call discussion were left to Ai Dehua and Jiang Hai. When the person on the other side heard that it was a big deal worth 300,000 renminbi, he immediately drove over without hesitation. After the contract was signed, the balance of the 300,000 renminbi of seaweed seeds was paid. The person on the other side of the line laughed like crazy. He said that he would immediately go back and arrange a plane to plant the seeds. Within 3 days he would help Jiang Hai finish planting them. In addition to the sea bath company and the seaweed, Jiang Hai also needed to buy expensive fish, prawns, crabs and other things to eat. In other words, cuttlefish, mullet and all kinds of shellfish, which lived at the bottom of the marine food chain. According to Ai Dehua's calculation, it would cost about 2 million renminbi to buy them, and this was only the first batch because these guys were just food. When the little guys in the fish farm grew up, they would naturally have to be fed. According to Ai Dehua, they could put in some bait and so on, which would save a lot of money. However, after some consideration, Jiang Hai felt that it would be better to let the fish hunt for food on their own. After all, Jiang Hai didn't want to feed the fish when they were in a wild state. However, according to what Jiang Hai said, Ai Dehua did some research and found that he needed to put in some fish every 3 months, which was a quarter. The first batch cost 2 million renminbi and the subsequent batches were about the same. Although the fish were growing up, they were also dying. Therefore, the amount of fish food he put in did not fluctuate too much. Even so, Jiang Hai needed to invest 13 million renminbi in fish food for a year, plus the 3 million renminbi he spent today, it would be 16 million renminbi. This did not include the cost of the boats, the cost of oil and the tax of the sea farm. If all of these were added together, it would be estimated to be 24 million renminbi. Thinking of this number, Edward Anderson was forced to be serious. According to the standard of 60% of the American red fish, 3 million fish would be 8 million mature fish. If the weather was good and there were no disasters or diseases, it would be 18 million renminbi if he could only earn 10 renminbi per fish. That would be a loss of 6 million renminbi. In other words, he had to earn more than 15 renminbi per fish to be able to recoup his investment. However, he also had to take into account the tax. Although he would receive subsidies later on to make up for most of the loss, he would still have to pay for it in the early stages. If it was not like what Iron Bull said, where he could earn 20 renminbi per fish when they were in their best condition, he might not be able to recoup his investment even after a year of good weather. Thinking of this, he could not help but shudder. No, I have to find a way to get the boss to recoup some money first. Otherwise, when the time comes, it will be really troublesome. Ai Dehua looked at the heartless Jiang Hai beside him and whispered in his heart. Boss, let's go fishing tomorrow? In the end, as if he had made up his mind about something, Edward Anderson turned his head and looked at Jiang Hai beside him. Hearing this, Jiang Hai could not help but be stunned. Fishing? Eh. Looking at Ai Dehua's serious face, Jiang Hai's eyes began to shine. Fishing seems like a good idea. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Recently, I've been looking at the Crown Princess. She seems to be poisoned. *CK, I'm not that gay. Ahem, okay, the female lead is indeed quite beautiful. Chapter 110. Boss, you can't always rely on me. If you really want to develop the ocean, then it's time to recruit people. Standing on Jiang Hai's specially installed fishing boat, Philip said to Jiang Hai with a depressed face. His real identity is a cowboy, but he is always called a crew member by Jiang Hai. This is not a good thing because he hates the sea. Well, I know. I'm in a hurry today. I'll go recruit in 2 days. While fixing the fishing net according to Edward Anderson's instructions, Jiang Hai smiled and said to Philip, who was complaining. Let's hope so. Philip said helplessly as he patted his forehead. Originally, according to Edward Anderson's calculation, Jiang Hai shouldn't spend too much money to buy fish seedlings. After all, he only planned to buy codfish at first. Later, when Jiang Hai said that he wanted to raise valuable fish, he naively thought that he was going to raise American redfish. But who knew that after he went there, Jiang Hai's extravagant character instantly occupied the main position. In addition to raising American redfish, he also raised grouper, longzhu and 4-year-old salmon? If it's just these then it's fine, but what the hell is that king crab and spotted shrimp? And lobsters? Thinking of this, Edward Anderson's heart faintly ached. If the fish he raised this time really lost all his money, then Jiang Hai would be in trouble. Fortunately, there were a lot of fish in the original fishery. According to Edward Anderson's research, if all the fish and shrimps in the fishery were caught, it would be about $8 million. Of course, Jiang Hai wouldn't really let him catch all of them. Maintaining the marine ecosystem didn't just rely on the fish raised by Jiang Hai. However, catching some to subsidize the family was indispensable. At the same time, catching fish like this also left room for new fish seedlings to survive. After all, after 10 years of development, the fish in Jiang Hai's fishery was almost full. If he didn't catch some, when it was time to put in the aquatic plants and fish seedlings, those things wouldn't be enough for the playthings underwater. Therefore, after buying the fish seedlings and aquatic plants yesterday, Jiang Hai went home and prepared for the night. The next morning, Ai Dehua took him and Philemon, who was forcibly taken from the cowshed by Ai Dehua, out to sea on a fishing boat. Ai Dehua was indeed a top fisherman. The fishing boat he assembled wasn't small, and it was very good. Although it wasn't big, it ran fast on the sea and didn't sway. Jiang Hai liked it very much. At the same time, the most important thing was that there were many rooms here, and the decorations inside were very good. It could be foreseen that even if they went out to sea to fish in the future, it wouldn't be too difficult. At this time, although the 3 people on the boat were on the same boat, their moods were different. Jiang Hai was excited because this was the first time he went out to sea to fish. The last time he came to look for fish, it couldn't be counted as fishing. Ai Dehua was a little anxious. He was eager to earn back the first sum of money for his boss. As for Philemon, well, he didn't have any other thoughts besides muttering there. Bang! However, just as Philip was happily muttering to himself, there was a sudden explosion. On the calm sea surface, a huge figure suddenly appeared. The sea water instantly collapsed onto the boat, drenching Jiang Hai and Philip. Fortunately, the 2 of them had already changed into waterproof fishermen's clothes, otherwise, they would have been drenched like a drowned rat. Shark, shark. The explosion here attracted the attention of Jiang Hai and Philemon. In Philemon's eyes, a huge shark directly jumped out of the water, jumped straight to the sea surface, and then fell heavily into the water. Then it swam towards the side of the fishing boat while wagging its tail. This shark seemed to be about 4 meters long. Of course, compared to the fishing boat which was dozens of meters long, it was still small. But compared to humans it was already twice as tall. Seeing the shark swimming close to the fishing boat, Philemon couldn't help but frown. 4 fishermen having a shark following them wasn't good news, because sharks were also hunting fish. If his fishing boat put a net here, then the shark might eat some of the fish. Of course, it would be fine if it only ate some of the fish. The most frightening thing was that the shark would break through the school of fish. At that time, they wouldn't be able to catch any fish, which would affect the harvest. At the same time, the fishing net might also entangle the shark. If it was an ordinary reef shark, they might not care too much, but such a big shark could easily break the fishing net. One must know that a cheap fishing net would cost tens of thousands of dollars, and the expensive ones would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Therefore, for regular fishermen, sharks, especially large sharks, were not a good thing. Of course, catching sharks in the open sea and getting shark fins was another matter. It's okay, don't you recognize it? It's the tiger shark that I raised. However, compared to Philemon's surprise, Jiang Hai was a lot calmer. Lying on the boat's bow and looking at the shark swimming below, Jiang Hai recognized it at a glance. It was the shark that he raised. He hadn't seen it for a while and it seemed to have grown up in the sea. The effect of Jiang Hai's dragon blood wasn't ordinary. It was precisely because of the dragon blood that this shark sensed Jiang Hai's position as soon as Jiang Hai entered the sea. It quickly swam over just like a kitten or a puppy playing there. Seeing the shark's appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but walk to the boat's bow and pat the shark's head. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Philemon was stunned. He had heard of raising dolphins and orcas, but what the hell was raising sharks? One must know that sharks were very stupid. They were cold-blooded and didn't recognize people. They didn't have domesticated DNA stored in their bodies. Therefore almost no one raised them. Even if someone raised them, it would be impossible to pat their head. Originally, Philemon wanted to remind Jiang Hai. But when he saw the shark turn over in front of Jiang Hai, he became confused. F***CK, is this a shark or a dog? Don't you know that you can't feel anything when you turn over? Although it felt strange, even if the shark was stupid, at least it showed that it wasn't hostile to Jiang Hai. And Jiang Hai didn't let it turn over for too long and directly turned it back. Go under the sea and drive some fish into our fishing net. Patting the sand tiger shark's head, Jiang Hai said with a smile. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the sand tiger shark shook its head and then drilled into the water, disappearing. Boss, you don't really think that it will help drive the fish away, do you? Obviously, Philemon also heard what Jiang Hai said to the sand tiger shark. When Jiang Hai returned to the deck, Philemon couldn't help but laugh. Who knows? Jiang Hai shrugged. He couldn't really say that he had the ability to communicate with animals. Of course, it was with animals that had absorbed his blood. In this way, the fishing boat sailed for about 5 minutes before AI Dehua's voice came from the cabin. Release the net. Hearing AI Dehua's voice, Philemon immediately controlled the machine and released the fishing net from the back into the water. Fishing nets were used for different purposes, so naturally they were made of different materials. In terms of usage, fishing nets can be divided into gill net, trawl net, purse seine net, net building net, and net spreading net. Different uses naturally lead to different materials. For example, the trawl net used by Jiang Hai was made of steel wire, nylon rope, and glass steel wire. Although the weight was reduced because of the addition of fiberglass, this net was still calculated by tons. This was not something that can be handled by human strength. Therefore, it must be controlled by a machine. There were 2 devices to control this machine. One was in the control room, which can be directly controlled from the control room, and the other was on the deck. Although Philip didn't know much about sailing, he was still very familiar with the operation of the net. With his skills, it didn't take long for the net to spread out behind Jiang Hai's fishing boat. Not long after the net spread out, Jiang Hai felt that the speed of the fishing boat suddenly decreased a bit. In the gaps of the net, Jiang Hai could see some fish jumping out of the water. Boss, I have to admit that you have a lot of fish in your fishery. Although the net hadn't been released yet, Philemon could see it clearly. Jiang Hai did have a lot of fish. He originally thought that AI Dehua was just joking when he said that there were tens of millions of fish here. But he didn't expect that this estimate was still conservative. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai also smiled happily. He was lying on the boat's bow looking at the fish net below. What's caught here weren't fish but green franklins. After about an hour, Edward Anderson's voice came from the deck again, asking Jiang Hai and Philemon to pull up the net. Philemon didn't say anything and immediately went to operate the machine. As the ship slowed down, the net was gradually lifted out of the water by Philemon. Jiang Hai's net was a large one, and the gap between the net was 15 centimeters. In other words, almost all the fish below 30 centimeters would escape through the gap. But when the net was lifted, Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh," because the tightened net in front of him was like a huge ball. The fish were squeezed into the middle of the net, which had a diameter of 4 to 5 meters. Jiang Hai really didn't catch fish but franklins. I'm here to recommend it. I'll push it to the shelves next week. Please support and collect it. It's my first time writing a farming story, so I'm very nervous. Chapter 111. 11.5 tons, that's about 30,000 fish. And this is just the fish from the upper level. If we catch more fish from the lower level, there should be more. Looking at the numbers displayed on the hydraulic screen, Philip couldn't help but smile. Then he controlled the robot arm to pull the fishing net into the empty fish pond. But at this time there was no water in the pond. This was because the fish needed to be sorted. Some of the fish were very valuable while some weren't. Naturally, their fates were different. After Philip put the 11 tons of fish into the pond, Ai Dehua came out of the cockpit and followed Jiang Hai and Philip into the fish pond. Now they needed to sort out the fish, put some valuable fish into the pool next to them, and throw away or kill some inedible things such as water plants, jellyfish, sea snakes and so on which they had caught. Then they need to release some things back into the sea such as turtles, sharks, seals, sea lions, fur seals, dolphins and so on. These creatures, other than those who were targeted and killed by crazy people, were basically not targeted by ordinary fishing boats. According to Philemon, they wouldn't catch too many strange things in the upper layer of the fish. Sure enough, after the net was opened, in addition to aquatic plants, most of the fish were fish. There were all kinds of fish. The most conspicuous ones were a few huge red fish. These fish had sharp spikes on their bodies, making them look very scary. When Ai Dehua and Philip saw these fish, they immediately ran over and grabbed them by the gills before throwing them into the pond. What kind of fish are these? They look very festive. Jiang Hai then joined them. Holding a fish, Jiang Hai asked Philip. He was indeed very curious. This is the vermilion sebastes, a very valuable fish that can grow up to 1 meter. It originally lived in the Pacific Canada region, but later on the Newfoundland fishery planted it directly, so we have it here. The price of this fish is very high. Not only can it be eaten, but it can also be raised as an ornamental fish. The one in your hand can be sold for about $2,000. Hearing Philip's introduction, Jiang Hai's eyes couldn't help but light up. A fish can be sold for $2,000? That's a big profit. But he was actually thinking too much. It would take 6 or 7 years for the fish to grow to the size of the one in Jiang Hai's hand. It's possible to raise this kind of fish to make money, but it's difficult to make a lot of money in batches. After knowing that the fish in his hand was so valuable, Jiang Hai became more careful and put the fish back into the pond. After putting the fish in the pond, Jiang Hai caught another red fish and was about to put it in the pond, but he was stopped by Philip. This kind of fish is the vermilion sebastes. It's valuable. However, his family conditions didn't allow it, and he found that smoking wasn't addictive after a few years, so he quit. Although his financial conditions allowed it now, he didn't intend to pick it up again. It was good that he didn't smoke. Come boss, let me introduce you to the fish we caught. Seeing that they were smoking while Jiang Hai, the boss, didn't do anything, Philip came over with a smile and introduced the fish to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai is the boss of a fishery. If he doesn't know what kind of fish it is, then it would be a bit strange. Speaking of which, he has been interested in these fish for a long time. When he heard Philip's words, he also went to the fish pond. This is codfish, this is herring, and this is sea bass, the greediest fish in the sea, but it's also the easiest to catch. These are the ones I introduced just now: vermilion sebastes, lambreme, black-striped sebastes, black-eyed sebastes, red sebastes, golden-eye sebastes, filehead sebastes, silver rock bass, brown trout you've seen before. It's a migratory fish. This is Atlantic salmon, just like trout. I guess this fish is about to produce seeds. Philip stood beside the fish pond and introduced more than 10 kinds of fish to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai really couldn't tell them apart, so he could only memorize them. He had to admit that being a fisherman required a lot of experience and vision, especially in a fishery like Jiang Hai's. After all, this fishery hadn't been fished for several years. Because he had never fished before, the fish in the fish farm here was very mixed, unlike those farmed fish farms. If one's vision wasn't good enough, they would really pick the worst ones. At this time, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel lucky that he asked Ai Dehua for help. I know this fish, lionfish. After introducing all the fishes that looked similar, Jiang Hai saw a few that looked different. These fishes had long spikes on their bodies. He remembered that he knew these fishes. They looked very flowery and had hard spikes on their bodies. He had seen them on TV before. This is sea bream. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip hesitated for a moment and decided to tell Jiang Hai the truth. Almost the same. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. He took a closer look and found that they looked almost the same. Far from it. The scientific name of lionfish is sebastes. It belongs to the Scorpionidae family, just like the scarlet sebastes and black sebastes over there. The sea bream belongs to the sea bream family. Most importantly, lionfish is a harmful fish. Because of its toxicity, not many people like to eat it, so the price is much lower. We don't have lionfish here. It's a fish from the Pacific Ocean. We have sea bream here, so the price is very high. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip smiled and said. Hearing Philip's words, Jiang Hai smiled a little awkwardly. It seems that his knowledge is really not enough. Okay, that's about it. Let's set the net again and then we'll sell them. This time let's set the net deeper. Hearing that Philip had almost finished introducing the fish, Ai Dehua stood up and threw the cigarette butt into the trash can that was already prepared on the side of the ship. Then he returned to the cabin. As for Jiang Hai and Philip, they stayed on the deck and pushed the precious fish into a separate room next to them. The room was specially made to be humid. Inside the room, there was a sink that was specially made to store live seafood. Seafood was best when it was still alive. No matter how fresh it wasn't as delicious as live ones. Naturally, there was no live ones that could be sold at a high price. Of course, things like tuna would die once it left the water. As for the rest, the less valuable ones were pushed into the cold storage. There was also a layer of water here, but with so many fish squeezed together, they would naturally live if they could, and die if they couldn't, as long as they were still fresh when they were sent to the fish merchant. After everything was ready, Edward Anderson's voice was heard from the loudspeaker. Obviously, he had seen the existence of the fish through the sonar. Philip immediately manipulated the crane to put the fishing net into the water, but this time, the rope was longer. The fish they caught just now were from the upper layer, about 5 to 20 meters above the sea level. This time their net was deeper. They wanted to catch fish between 20 to 30 meters. At this time, they were still on the continental shelf. 30 meters deep meant that they had already dragged the fish to the bottom of the sea. This time they would catch more fish. The reason why they didn't choose to go this deep was that there were reefs in the area just now, but there weren't any in this area. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Chapter 112. Wow, it's much more than I expected. Looking at the constantly changing pressure data on the fishing net, Philip couldn't help but whisper. If the fishing net just now was sold, it could probably be sold for about $50,000. Of course, this trip to the sea, the diesel cost $20,000 plus the loss of the fishing boat, the loss of the fishing net, and so on. Adding it all together, the profit of this trip was only about $10,000. Plus the salary of the crew, there wasn't much left. Of course, this refers to the total income of this much. However, it was obvious that Jiang Hai's fishing area had more than just this amount of fish. If other fishermen knew about this, they would probably be overjoyed. Now that they had caught a second net of fish, they would make a pure profit. They would make as much profit as they could get. Now that they had caught a second net of fish, they would earn as much as they could get. The pressure is too much. Do you need to slow down? Looking at the reading on the fishing net getting higher and higher, Philip picked up the walkie-talkie and said to Ai Dehua in the cabin. Hearing Philip's words, Ai Dehua quickly replied. No need. Do you think the boss's boat is the same as our boat? Everything on this boat is the best, including the fishing net. Even a normal nylon fishing net can withstand this pressure, let alone ours. It's okay, but you have to pay attention. Call me when the reading reaches 300 feet per square meter. Listening to Ai Dehua's words, Philip couldn't help but be stunned. Although he knew that Jiang Hai was willing to spend money, to be honest, he still wanted to be a cowboy, so he didn't go with him when he loaded the boat. Now that he heard his brother-in-law's words, he was relieved. I'll go to the cabin to get a cup of coffee, do you want it? After learning that there was nothing here for the time being, Jiang Hai stood in the cold, then knocked on the window of the console next to him and said to Philip. It was only the beginning of January, the coldest time in Boston. Although Jiang Hai was born in the Northeast, and the temperature was much colder than here, he still couldn't withstand the sea breeze. He wasn't like Philip. Perhaps for the convenience of operation, there was a special room at the console with a separate heater and glass that could be used to block the wind. Jiang Hai stood directly in the cold wind. Even with his physical fitness, he still couldn't withstand it. After confirming that there was nothing to worry about for the time being, he decided to go back and make some coffee to drink, even though he didn't like to drink coffee. But this thing does have the effect of warming the stomach. Oh, give me a cup too, thank you, boss. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip chuckled. Then Jiang Hai walked into the cabin. Jiang Hai's fishing boat was just like what he said when it was built. Walking into the residential area, Jiang Hai went straight to the kitchen and used the coffee machine there to make coffee. He made 3 cups at once. He held 1 cup for himself and then took the other cup to the steering room. He didn't forget that Ai Dehua hadn't drunk it yet. Walking into the cockpit, he saw Ai Dehua driving the ship while looking at the underwater sonar and the pressure reading of the fishing net on the side of the cockpit. This was not the first time Jiang Hai had entered the cockpit, but he had to admit that he felt a headache every time he came in. These instruments and the like were really troublesome. If he hadn't properly studied them, just looking at these hundreds of buttons would make him feel nauseous. The various instruments, positioning, and broadcast made him feel a headache just by looking at them. "Hey boss, thanks." Hearing the footsteps, Ai Dehua looked back and saw Jiang Hai walking in with coffee. He also chuckled, then took his cup and continued to look at the data in front of him. "How's it going?" Jiang Hai certainly didn't understand, but at this time as the boss he had to ask and pretend to know. So Jiang Hai thought about it and said to Edward Anderson in front of him. "Not bad, the things in the net now are more than before. Although the sea here is not deep, there are a lot of good things. In 10 minutes we can set up the net." Pointing to the shadow shown on the sonar and the pressure bar from the net, Edward Anderson said with a smile. But just as he was joking, his face suddenly changed because 2 black bars suddenly floated over on the sonar map. According to the sonar display, these 2 black bars were estimated to be about 4 meters long. These 2 black bars were rushing in the direction of the fishing net at this time. "What's this? A big fish?" Looking at the reading displayed on the sonar, even Ai Dehua was a little confused. At this time, the figure in front of him didn't seem to notice and plunged into Jiang Hai's fishing net. This huge impact even made the boat shake a little, and at this time the reading of the fishing net increased a lot in an instant. Seeing this, Ai Dehua immediately grabbed the walkie-talkie and was about to ask Philemon to set up the net. His sixth sense told him that he caught a big fish, but before he could say anything, Philemon had already set up the fishing net on the deck. Philemon had been paying attention to the pressure of the fishing net since the beginning. When the pressure of the fishing net suddenly rose from 220 to 270, he knew that it was either a big fish or a reef. No matter what, he needed to get the fishing net up immediately. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't have time to drink coffee. He immediately ran out of the cabin and came to the surface. Ai Dehua also slowly stopped the boat and came to the deck. When the two arrived on the deck, Philemon had already controlled the crane to pull up the fishing net. The fishing net, which was bigger than the previous one, was slowly being lifted out of the sea. At this time, a huge sailfish was constantly struggling in the fishing net. Its sharp mouth had already stretched out of the fishing net. Looking at this big guy, Jiang Hai's mouth unconsciously opened. This was the first time he saw a sailfish in his life and it looked really fierce. Bang bang. At this time, on the sea level beside the boat, a shark also jumped out of the sea. Jiang Hai looked back and knew that this shark was his pet, big idiot. He didn't expect that he just casually said that he was going to catch a fish, and it really caught a sailfish. "Boss, we're rich this time. This fish alone can be sold for $100,000. Philemon, who was controlling the crane to slowly move towards the pool, couldn't help but shout loudly when he saw the fish. $100,000? Hearing Philemon's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but swallow. It seems that raising fish is really a profitable job. A fish can be sold for $100,000? He already felt that his breathing was a little rapid. Could it be that he had never thought about the problem of whether he could raise this fish? As for Ai Dehua, when he looked at the fish, his eyes were also shining, but when he saw Jiang Hai's sand tiger shark, his eyes shone even brighter. He didn't expect Jiang Hai's pet to be so awesome. "I have to go back to Chengdu in the next 2 days, so I'll post it on time. If there's a mistake, please leave me a message in the book review and comments section. I'll sort it out when I come back. Finally, I'll ask for your support and collection." Chapter 113. Hua. Under Philemon's control, the large bag of fish was then placed into the pool next to it. However, as soon as it was put in, the huge sailfish moved vigorously, hoping to leave the pool. Unfortunately, it thought too much. Ai Dehua was already prepared. He rushed over, picked up a huge blanket and wrapped it around its body. Then Jiang Hai and Philemon also ran over, picked up the big fish that was almost 3 meters long, and walked into the reservoir next to it. The scientific name of this fish was Atlantic blue marlin, but although it was called a marlin, it was a sailfish. This fish could grow up to 5 meters and weigh 1,800 kilograms, which was more than 1 ton, nearly 2 tons. Of course, this fish was not so big. If this fish was so big, not to mention Jiang Hai's big idiot, Jiang Hai and the others would not be able to lift it. Although the fish was struggling, Jiang Hai estimated it was about 600 kilograms when they lifted it. Although it was not particularly heavy, it was enough for the 3 men to use all their strength. Fortunately, Jiang Hai was there. Although he was not qualified to be a sailor, he was strong enough. He directly picked up the fish, came to the reservoir and put the fish in. Watching the fish swimming in the water, Jiang Hai and the others were happy. If this fish died, it would be worthless. Such a big blue marlin, if it died, would only be worth 30,000. Philemon shouted 100,000 because it was alive. Marlin, sailfish and tuna, these expensive fish were basically not sold alive. Even in aquariums, there were few marlin or sailfish on display because these fish were too difficult to catch. The swimming speed of these fish was very fast. Fishing boats could not catch up, so fishing boats with trawlers would definitely not be able to catch them. As for the seine fishing boats, the speed of the net was too slow. Even if they caught them, these fish could use their speed to drill out from the other end of the fishing net. Even if they could not, their impact could break most of the fishing net. If Philip hadn't set up the net immediately, the fish would have slipped away and even destroyed the net. In this way, Jiang Hai and the others would suffer a great loss. A new net would be broken after just one net. That would be extremely tragic. Therefore, 90% of the way to catch these three types of fish was to rely on fishing. However, there was a big problem after fishing it up. The fish was too big and struggled too hard. Although it was only one person, 3 to 5 men wouldn't be able to hold it down. If it wasn't for Jiang Hai, Ai Dehua and Philip might have died. In addition, these fish needed to swim continuously in order to breathe. They would die soon after leaving the sea. So basically, when such fish were caught, they would be killed and made into ice. But Jiang Hai's fishing boat was different. His reservoir was filled with water from the outside. In other words, when the boat was sailing, the water in the reservoir would constantly change. This way the fish wouldn't die. At least, it was enough to ensure that they were still alive when they were sold. We're rich this time. Boss, remember to give us a bonus. Looking at the blue marlin in the water, Philip's mouth would have curled into a smile if it weren't for his ears. He immediately said to Jiang Hai, "Of course. 10,000 per person. It's a good start." Not to mention the other fish, this blue marlin alone was worth 100,000. How could Jiang Hai be stingy with the money? He waved his hand and said to the two people beside him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip and Edouard Anderson smiled even more happily. Then everyone returned to the deck where there was still a lot of fish to deal with. As for Jiang Hai, he deliberately caught a sea bass about half a meter long and went below the deck. The biggest contributor to catching this big guy was Big Fool in the sea. Jiang Hai had to reward him no matter what, right? When Jiang Hai came over, Big Dumb was also very excited. Obviously, this time it was a blind cat that hit a mouse. Fortunately, this was within the range of Jiang Hai's fish farm, and Jiang Hai's fish farm accidentally bumped into it. Otherwise, with Blue Spear's speed, it was estimated that in less than 10 minutes, Big Dumb would not even be able to see the waves behind the opponent's butt. It should be known that this kind of fish was very expensive. Under such circumstances, there were naturally many people who wanted to catch it. However, under such circumstances, the World Conservation Organization did not list it as an endangered species and did not restrict its capture at all. This showed how difficult it was to catch this kind of fish. One had to admit that it was necessary to rely on others to catch this kind of fish. This is your reward, come out and play. Walking in front of Big Fool, Jiang Hai deliberately took out his hand from his glove, then took out a small knife, cut a wound and squeezed a drop of blood from it. In the past month he did not have many opportunities to bleed, so his scales were a lot longer. Today's drop of blood was not very important to him. After dripping the blood into the mouth of the sea bass, he stuffed the fish into Big Fool's mouth. As soon as the fish entered Big Fool's mouth, Big Fool knew that it was a good fish. He did not even bite it and directly swallowed it. Then, after a splash in front of Jiang Hai, he went to the bottom of the sea. The energy in Jiang Hai's blood was too strong, so Big Fool needed to digest it well. After Big Fool left, Jiang Hai also returned to the deck. This time he found that there were more things in the pool, which meant that there were more expensive things. When Jiang Hai went over to take a look, his eyes instantly lit up. Not to mention other things, just the dozens of large and small lobsters were enough to make Jiang Hai excited. F***CK, this is more than 10 kilograms. Walking into the pool, Jiang Hai grabbed a huge lobster. No, about 8 or 9 kilograms, but such a big lobster can be considered a shrimp king. It can be sold for at least $2,000 or $3,000. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip said with a smile. Such a big lobster is indeed not small but not particularly big, it is still within the acceptable range. Only $2,000 or $3,000? Hey, your lobsters here are too cheap, forget it, today's fish is good, let's eat this guy tonight. Looking at the lobster waving its big pincers, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Eat? Only the boss is willing to eat? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Dehua and Philip looked at each other, and then Ai Dehua said with some helplessness. They really don't know whether Jiang Hai is here to make money or to enjoy life. In fact, for Jiang Hai he came here to make money and to enjoy life, which is very good. Then everyone began to divide and pack. Compared with the last time, there were more fish and less other things. This time, other things accounted for almost 70% of the fish. Jianghai's seabed still has a lot of things. Dozens of large and small lobsters, all the lobsters less than 2 kilograms, that is, 1 kilogram, were thrown back to the bottom of the sea. In the United States, lobsters are also divided into different grades. Every half a pound is a grade. In the market, the smallest lobster was 1 pound and was called chicken. This was the smallest grade, but it couldn't be sold for much money. The bigger ones were called quarters and the bigger ones were called sects. The biggest ones were more than 2 pounds and were called jumbo. Those without pincers were called cull. This kind of lobster was worthless. About 1/3 of these lobsters were less than 1 kilogram. Even if they were all picked up, there were still more than 50 lobsters to be sold. These lobsters alone are not a small income. In addition to the lobsters, this net also had a lot of shrimps and crabs. In the previous net there were almost no shrimps, but in this net, there were almost 100 kilograms of Arctic sweet shrimps. Looking at this, Jiang Hai's mouth was watering. He liked to eat these shrimps the most. In addition to these shrimps, there were also a lot of crabs, including swimming crabs and walking crabs. These things also weighed more than 100 kilograms. If Jiang Hai kept these things, it would be enough for him to eat for a year. In addition to the lobsters, crabs and shrimps, there were also a lot of shellfish. But basically, these shellfish were thrown back into the sea by Ai Dehua and Philip. These shellfish could be used to raise fish in the future so they wouldn't go to waste. Most importantly, they didn't eat these things. This was one of the oldest cities in the United States. Now, looking at the scenery on the boat, Jiang Hai felt a little refreshed. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't want to go shopping, it was that he didn't know how to go shopping, and there was no one to accompany him. There were only 2 young people in his manor, but whether it was Harriman or Belle Lester, they were both very busy. Every day they were in a hurry. How could they have time to go shopping with Jiang Hai? Every morning when they woke up, they had to feed the cows, clean up the cow dung, and check if the cows were injured or sick. When they finally had some free time, they had to patrol the fence of the manor to see if there were any broken ones. Whether there were people or wild animals sneaking in, they had to deal with them. Most importantly, cowboys didn't have a day off, so they were so busy every day. This made Jiang Hai a little speechless. At the same time, he didn't know why he would go out on the streets. It was boring to go out by himself without anyone to accompany him. He didn't even have a man, let alone a girl. Sometimes when he wanted to buy clothes or food, he would go straight to Winthrop. There was everything there. If it didn't work, he could also shop online. The Amazon in the United States, eBay, and so on were not worse than the online shopping websites in China. Even the after-sales service was better. So even if he went to Boston to look at the scenery, he was too lazy to move. It's too boring. Looking at the boat slowly moving forward and the scenery on both sides of the river constantly moving backward, Jiang Hai whispered. However, although it was boring, he was too lazy to change Jiang Hai. He had to admit that sometimes the more a person stayed, the more lazy they would be to move. This was especially true for young people like Jiang Hai. He was not willing to come into contact with the outside world. Coupled with the fact that he was not short of money and had his own small circle, he was getting lazier and lazier. Although there was no redeeming feature to this, he was still very happy. While Jiang Hai was looking at the scenery there, many people were looking at him. As the saying goes, you are looking at the scenery, and the people who are looking at the scenery are looking at you. Of course, looking at Jiang Hai was completely different from the original meaning of this sentence. Originally, this sentence referred to looking at beautiful women. Even if they weren't beautiful, they had to be handsome. However, Jiang Hai wasn't a beautiful woman, nor was he handsome. Strictly speaking, Jiang Hai was just a very curious manor lord. These people were looking at Jiang Hai, not at him but at the money behind him. Although Boston was located on the East Coast, there were many Chinese people. It could be said that there was no one here who knew Jiang Hai. However, many of them knew Philip and Ai Dehua. Naturally, they had heard that the 2 of them had joined Green Forest. They had also heard that Green Forest had been bought by a young Chinese boss. So now, when they looked at Jiang Hai, they felt that Jiang Hai should be the boss. He doesn't seem to be anything special. He doesn't look like a rich person. Nowadays, Chinese people are rich. You don't understand. Maybe he is the son of a senior official or the child of a rich businessman. He looks a little short. His body and bones are okay, but he is a little too white. He doesn't look like a man who fights in the sea at all. Instead, he looks like a Xiaobai. Is this a billionaire? Looking at Jiang Hai, these fishermen whispered. Of course, their so-called whispers still passed into Jiang Hai's ears. For what they said, Jiang Hai could only twitch his mouth. He had long been used to being talked about like this. Thinking back, when he married his wife, his ex-wife, there were a lot of people talking about him. They said that he was a lucky bastard and that he was a freeloader. But in that kind of environment he could only endure it. The words of those people were 100 times worse than what these fishermen were saying. Although these fishermen didn't say anything good, at least they said that he was white. Well, in Jiang Hai's ears this was a good thing. While the crowd was talking, Jiang Hai's fishing boat slowly moved forward. It didn't take long before they arrived at the entrance of the fish store. Philip and the others had been waiting for a long time. They immediately jumped onto the fishing boat with a group of helpers and then went to the room where the fish were kept. When they walked in, everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. It really is the Atlantic blue spear. Kid, you're rich. One of the big men saw the Atlantic blue spear in the pond and punched Philip's chest. His face was full of excitement. Haha, it's not me who's rich, it's our boss who's rich. Well, don't talk too much. Hurry up and move these things down. Hearing this man's words, Philip laughed and said. Hearing his words, several people had already pulled the hook of a crane into the cabin and moved the pond out of the cabin. When the pond was moved into the fish store, the onlookers couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Wow, it's the Atlantic blue spear. It's a living Atlantic blue spear. Seeing the huge figure in the pond, the other fish of the same size instantly became a foil. Everyone's eyes were focused on the Atlantic blue spear. Wow, you're really lucky. You can even catch such a guy. At this time an old man walked out from the fish shop. This old man looked to be in his 50s or 60s, but he was still very healthy. Looking at Edward Anderson, who had stopped the boat and jumped down, the old man walked over first, patted his shoulder and said to him, "This is all thanks to our boss. He's a lucky guy." Philip and Ai Dehua knew that the reason they were able to catch the blue marlin was because of Jiang Hai's sand tiger shark. If it weren't for the shark, then it would have been impossible to catch the blue marlin. Now that he heard the old man's words, Ai Dehua naturally wouldn't take the credit. Lucky guy, this fish is great, very great. After all, it's a living Atlantic blue spear, so I'll give you $100,000 for this fish alone. Of course, the fish wouldn't be worth so much if it were sold by the caddy. After all, there was a limit to how expensive fish could be. Even the legendary bluefin tuna wasn't worth $100,000. But this blue spear was alive after all. If there were connections, this fish could be sold to some rich people as a pet or sent to an aquarium. Whether it was the government of the United States or those rich people, they would be happy to buy a living Atlantic blue spear for $100,000 or even $100,000. Of course, he had to have a way to get it. Otherwise, Jiang Hai could sell the fish. Deal. Look at the other fish. We have a good harvest today. After shaking hands with the old man in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a chuckle. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man said that there was no need to rush. Then he directly transferred $100,000 to Jiang Hai. After Jiang Hai confirmed the transfer, the old man hurriedly asked someone to send the fish away. After all, a dead Atlantic blue spear was worthless and he didn't want to lose money. Chapter 115. The rest of the fish is 76,212, the shrimp is 4,561, the crab is 12340, and the lobster is 10829. Altogether, the total is 103,942. Do you want to transfer the money or? After solving the problem of the blue gun, the old man immediately arranged for someone to send the blue gun away. Jiang Hai didn't ask where it would be sent, but listening to the old man's phone call, if there was no accident, it should be a Western restaurant in New York. It seems that someone is preparing to treat the blue gun as the treasure of their restaurant. After solving the problem of the blue gun, the other fish, shrimp, crab and lobster were all put on line and began to be weighed. However, during the weighing, Jiang Hai deliberately took out the largest lobster, a lot of Arctic sweet shrimps and some crabs. These were all things that he wanted to eat. In addition to these things, this trip's harvest was also quite rich. Although Jiang Hai didn't have any other choice, he still had a lot of things to eat. Transfer 80,000 to my bank account, and give me the rest in cash. Hearing this, Jiang Hai chuckled and said to the old man. If Jiang Hai wanted cash, the old man might have to raise some money, but Jiang Hai only wanted 20,000 in cash and he had that. He immediately pulled all the fish and shrimps to the back and gave Jiang Hai $3,942. Jiang Hai put away the change and gave the remaining 20,000 to Ai Dehua and Philip, $1 for each person. Wow, thank you, boss. Looking at the brand new dollar bills in front of him that still smelled of ink, Philip's eyes immediately turned green. After all, it had been a long time since he had seen bundles of dollar bills. Most importantly, this money was a reward, more of a gift, and didn't need to be taxed. It was like money picked up on the street. Did you have to pay taxes after picking up money on the street? Don't joke around. Jiang Hai gave them the cash because he had considered this aspect. Thank you, boss. Although he was a little worried about the fish farm's harvest, Ai Dehua still accepted the money that Jiang Hai gave him. He looked happily at the dollar bills in front of him. This money was enough to cover his work for several months. Work hard. You won't be short of money in the future. Looking at the two's excited expressions, Jiang Hai also smiled and stuffed the rest of the change into his pocket. He didn't have the habit of carrying a wallet when he went out. His clothes had many pockets that were specially used to store money, keys and so on, so when the money was stuffed in, it instantly bulged. Lucky lad, if you have any good goods in the future, send them to me. I won't treat you badly. Seeing that Jiang Hai was done, the old man behind him walked over and handed Jiang Hai a business card. The mayor of Winthrop had told Jiang Hai that generally speaking, people in the United States did not give out business cards, but there were exceptions. For example, someone selling insurance or like this old man collecting fish. The front of this business card was printed with his phone number, and the back of the business card was printed with the price of various precious fish species. Of course, the price of fish would fluctuate every day, but the general price was about the same. Jiang Hai nodded with a smile and put the business card away. Then he jumped onto his fishing boat and the three of them left the fish farm. But although they left, the fishermen still saw the money they had just made. It was impossible to say that these fishermen's eyes weren't green with envy. Some of these fishermen didn't even make $200,000 a year. It could be said that fishermen with an annual income of $200,000 were very rare in the entire fishing industry in the United States. After deducting taxes, expenses, and a bunch of other miscellaneous money, these fishermen's annual income was probably only tens of thousands of dollars. When they were lucky, they could be considered middle class, but when they were unlucky, they couldn't even be considered middle class. Now that they saw the money Jiang Hai made, it would be strange if they weren't green with envy. After seeing Jiang Hai and the others leave, many of them looked at each other. Of course, they didn't want to kidnap Jiang Hai but wanted to. Thanks to you guys today we didn't have lunch at noon. Let's go back and eat lobster at night. What do you want to eat? It's my treat today. Because there was no need to go offline, Jiang Hai didn't sit on the deck. Instead, he sat in the living room. Philemon sat across from him. As for Ai Dehua, he continued to sail the boat and look at the scenery outside. On the way back, Jiang Hai asked with a smile. Wow, today is really my lucky day. Philemon exclaimed when he heard that Jiang Hai not only gave him a bonus, but also wanted to treat him to a meal. You like it so much, come and help me. You'll make a lot of money. Hearing Philemon's exclamation, Edward Anderson said with a smile, but after hearing his words, Philemon immediately shook his head. Forget it, I don't want to float on the sea anymore. As long as the cattle in the manor are raised well, I don't believe that I'll make less money than on the boat. He was quite confident in Jiang Hai's cattle. Since the last time they killed a cow, they had eaten almost all of its meat, so they killed another one a few days ago. As a result, after this cow was killed, even Robbins was shocked and didn't know what to say. The slaughter rate reached 70% this time. After removing the bones, the head, and the offal, a total of 504 kilograms of meat was left. Nearly half of the meat was marbled, and the premium-grade beef accounted for 30% of the total. That's 75 kilograms of premium-grade beef, 166 pounds. According to the price of $350 per pound, this meat alone is worth $58,100. In addition to this meat, there are other types of meat which added up to the price of this meat. Jiang Hai and the others went all out to catch a blue spear for $100,000, and it had to be alive. A beef cow could also be sold for $100,000. How many blue guns are there in the sea? They can't be seen or touched. How many beef cows are there in Jiang Hai's manor? 20,000. Which one is the big one? He can't be wrong. However, since Jiang Hai has decided to develop the fishing industry, he naturally can't let the industry earn tens of millions or even millions a year. His goal is naturally to surpass 100 million, and the way to surpass 100 million is in his body. Okay, let Philip choose what to do. Have you thought about what to eat? Italian food or German food? Or what to eat? Interrupting the endless conversation between the two, Jiang Hai asked Edward in the driver's seat. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philip smiled and said, I don't care about eating, I'm happier with $10,000 on me than you treating me to a meal. The most important thing right now is to recruit people. Hearing Jiang Hai, Philip smiled and said to Jiang Hai, recruiting? Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai asked a question in a strange way. Yes, recruit people. Hearing Jiang Hai's puzzled words, Ai Dehua also said seriously. Then he told Jiang Hai why they want to recruit people. In fact, the main reason is that money moves people's hearts. With the development of the ocean over the years, the ocean itself is naturally getting worse and worse. The coral reefs that could be seen everywhere in the past are now rare, and the originally rich marine fish have become less and less with the transition of fishing over the years. In recent years, the life of fishermen near Boston has also been going downhill because of the transition of development. Everyone knows that the green forest has never caught fish, so everyone only suspected that there might be more fish in the fishing grounds of the green forest, but after all, it is private territory and no one has confirmed it, so they are not willing to take the risk of being caught and fined to fish there. But now it is different. Jiang Hai has already shown the fish there. Even if they can't catch blue marlin in one fishing trip, the $100,000 of fish is still very tempting to these people. Under such circumstances, some people may take the risk. If someone steals, it will be a loss for Jiang Hai. After all, every fish in that sea area belongs to Jiang Hai. If someone steals it, then the one who suffers the loss is Jiang Hai. This is the most unforgivable in a capitalist country. But if Ai Dehua is the only one, he can patrol during the day, but what about at night? There will always be some missed time. This could be seen from Ai Dehua and Luo Binsi. They were all from the same town. If it were not because he knew Ai Dehua when he recruited Philemon, and Philemon was not a pure cowboy, Jiang Hai might not be able to recruit this person. They usually did not even treat each other as friends. Even in the manner they worked for Jiang Hai. Usually, Luo Binsi and the others would never look for Ai Dehua and the others to play. Of course, when they gathered together, at least on the surface, it was still very harmonious. It was precisely because of this that now that Jiang Hai wanted to recruit sailors, Luo Binsi and the others were a little embarrassed. In the end, Ai Dehua came forward and explained it. Jiang Hai understood that he was a little unreasonable just now. But after knowing it, he naturally would not force them to come over, so only he and Ai Dehua came over. The owner of this bar is called Ariel. The owner of this sea warrior is called Al Claude. You can call him Al. He participated in World War II and was a major in the Navy before he retired. This destroyer was the ship he commanded at that time. It once attacked Midway Island but was later bombed at Pearl Harbor. Although it was later salvaged, it was seriously damaged. After World War II, he retired along with this ship. Later, he made a fortune in business. More than 10 years ago, when the government sold this ship, he bought it and transformed it into a bar. This is also the favorite entertainment place of all the sailors around here. After Jiang Hai got out of the car, Ai Dehua also parked the car and jumped out. He walked in front of Jiang Hai and looked at the giant ship in front of him. He introduced it to Jiang Hai. Then let's go in and have a look. Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then the two walked to the big ship. Obviously, sailors were richer than cowboys. Even the Navy earned more than the Army. The customers here were richer and more willing to spend money. Naturally, the hardware here was better. Not only was the main body outside a battleship, but when you walked in, you would find that the decoration inside was also a different world. Although it could not be compared to those top hotels, Western restaurants, and bars. But it was at least a few streets away from Old Tony's cowboy song. The decoration inside was almost as good as Jiang Hai's residential area. It was understandable. If Old Tony's cowboy song was decorated like this, it was unknown whether Old Tony would go bankrupt or not. But at least the cowboys would not be willing to go there. They usually herded cows roughly and drank roughly. A place that was too stylish was not suitable for them. On the other hand, the sailors earned even more. Although they were all rough men, their American genes made them more willing to enjoy life when they were free. He was willing to spend more money. If the service they received was the same, it would be strange if they did not curse on the streets. Of course, in Winthrop, there were also some small bars for sailors like Cowboy Song. But the attraction there was not as big as this one. Here, just entering the door did not require identification. Ordinary children were not allowed to enter. If it was not for Jiang Hai following Ai Dehua, he would not be able to enter. Walking into the bar, Jiang Hai found that it was really far from Cowboy Song. And it seemed that it was not just a bar. As soon as he walked into the hall, Jiang Hai saw a notice on the side, telling Jiang Hai about the entertainment facilities on the ship. This ship was divided into 3 floors. The lowest floor was a disco. It was very lively. Jiang Hai stood on the ground and felt that the ground was constantly shaking because of the music, but it was obvious that Jiang Hai did not like to go there. The first floor was a bar. It was divided into 2 parts. The left part was a more traditional bar. The decoration was similar to Cowboy Song, but it was more luxurious. The tables and chairs were better. There were many people playing billiards, playing darts and so on. The right part was also a bar, but it was a music bar. Unlike the disco below, it played some country music or some sailor music. Although the style was similar, the atmosphere was completely different. As for the top floor, there were some private rooms. According to Ai Dehua's introduction to Jianghai, there were some people looking for special services in these private rooms. There were also some people who were there to gamble for small amounts of money and so on. Although Winthrop was not Las Vegas, it was impossible for all the people in the United States to go there if they wanted to play. Not to mention the money, it was not necessary to waste time. Today, Ai Dehua took Jianghai to the music bar on the right. According to Jiang Dehue, most of the people who went to the left to play were young people, and in the eyes of this old man, young people were naturally not very reliable. As soon as he walked in, Jianghai felt a different style. As soon as he walked in, a special tune rushed into Jianghai's mind. Jianghai knew that this was some R&B, but he did not know the specific meaning. He was not a musician. Following the sound of the music, he saw a fat black woman who seemed to be about 200 pounds standing on the stage. She was wearing a shiny tight dress and there was a band behind her. Her curly and fluffy long hair was tied behind her head with a hairpin. Her whole head looked like a large pineapple. Jianghai, who originally thought that this sound was quite good, lost interest in an instant. But below the stage there were many tall guys who were listening with great interest. "Boss, wait here first. I'll see if those old guys are here." Regardless of whether Jianghai was interested in listening or not, in Ai Dehua's view, they came here not to listen to music but to recruit people. So he said something to Jianghai and walked into the crowd in the distance. As for Jianghai, he sat in front of the bar not far away and looked around. "Hello, what can I do for you?" At this moment, a blonde girl wearing a white shirt and a plaid skirt came over and asked Jianghai. Jianghai knew that this set of clothes was the standard clothes for the bartender here. No matter if it was a man or a woman, they had to wear it because it was said that the boss here, the military officer, was Scottish, so he usually wore it at home. Jianghai had reservations about men wearing skirts, but the girl was quite beautiful in it. The girl in front of him was a very beautiful girl. She was about 1.65 meters tall, with blonde hair, light blue eyes, and some small freckles on her white and tender skin. She looked really pure. "A glass of beer, thank you." Unfortunately, Jianghai was not a lecher. Naturally, he wouldn't say anything inexplicable. He just glanced at the price list on the bar and ordered a glass of beer. Hearing Jianghai's words, the girl went to the side, got a beer glass and placed it in front of Jianghai. Jianghai took the beer and drank it. It was a German dark beer. The taste was a bit bitter, but the aftertaste was good. Although it was not as good as the ale brewed by Old Thor, it was still drinkable. "You look very unfamiliar. Is this your first time here?" The bar here was different from the underground bar on the other side. Most of the people in the bar here were middle-aged men in their 40s. They were different from the young people on the other side. There was an old saying in Wuxia, "No doubts at 40." It meant that men would no longer be confused after 40, although there was no such saying in the United States. However, men in the United States at the age of 40 were basically married and had established a career. Moreover, those who could come here to drink were basically not lacking in money. Such people had strong self-control and were very stable. Now that Jianghai, a young man of 26 or 27 years old, had suddenly joined them, it really made the girl a little curious. Today's second update, continuously delivered. Chapter 117. "Ah, it's my first time here." Putting down the glass in his hand, Jianghai nodded to the girl with a smile. "Are you here to go to school?" "Which school?" Hearing Jianghai admit it, the girl also chuckled and asked. "Oh no. Looking at my age, I don't look like someone who went to school. It's been a long time since I graduated. I bought a manor here and raised cows and fish." Hearing the girl's words, Jianghai explained. "Wow, I didn't expect you to be a capitalist." Hearing Jianghai's words, the girl's eyes narrowed and she said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jianghai also knew that she was joking, but it was the first time he was told this by someone else. "Let's get to know each other. My name is Karma Cliff. I work here. I don't see many people of my age all year round." Looking at Jianghai's shy smile, the girl here took the initiative to reach out her hand, shook Jianghai's hand and introduced herself. "My name is Jianghai. If you have time in the future, you are welcome to come to my manor to play." Shaking the other party's soft little hand, Jianghai also said with a chuckle. Hearing his words, the girl in front of him showed a hint of surprise. "Do you want to ask me out?" Hearing the girl's words, Jianghai was embarrassed again. Well, he really doesn't know how to get in touch with girls, and to be honest, Jiang Hai was just being polite. Well, I'm just teasing you. Haha, it seems that you shouldn't come here often in the future. You should go to the left side to play. The pace here is too slow for you. It will make you stupid. Seeing Jiang Hai's wonderful expression, the girl here couldn't help but laugh. Hearing her hearty laughter, Jiang Hai also touched his nose and smiled a little awkwardly. Hey Karma, give me a glass of whiskey. At this moment, a female voice suddenly came from the door, and then in Jiang Hai's sight, a woman dressed in a fairly urban style came in from the outside. This woman looks about the same age as Jiang Hai. She is also a white woman, very good looking with long straight blonde hair, wearing a white woman's suit. She looks well behaved, but she gives people a different kind of aura. The woman said as she walked forward. Then she sat in a position separated from Jiang Hai. She supported her head with one hand as if she had a headache. Karma, who was chatting with Jiang Hai, couldn't help but frown after hearing the woman's words. He turned and walked back to the bar, but he didn't pour whiskey as the woman said. Instead, he poured a glass of milk and put it in front of the woman. When the woman looked up and saw the milk in front of her, she was stunned. I say, sister, in your current state you still want a drink? Don't joke around, drink this glass of milk quickly and then go back to sleep. Knocking on the bar in front of her, the girl said with a look of displeasure. His first thought was, does this woman named Shenty Clive know that he is rich, so she has some ideas about him? If that was really the case, then it was better for him not to agree. What if she got a bag? What would he do then? But Jiang Hai can't refuse a beautiful woman like this. He just looked at this woman and was a little confused. Of course, little girl from the Clive family. But just as Jiang Hai was about to refuse, Edward Anderson's rough voice also came from behind. Jiang Hai looked back and found that behind him, there were several big men standing at this time. Compared with the cowboys found by Robbins, the people found by Ai Dehua seemed to be bigger. When they saw Jiang Hai looking at them, these people nodded their heads with good intentions. Uncle Anderson. Hearing Ai Dehua's words, Shenty Clive immediately spoke. Our boss's manor has always welcomed you, right boss? Hearing the girl's words, Ai Dehua also smiled softly, then deliberately touched Jiang Hai with the tip of his elbow, indicating that he should agree first. Although he was a little confused, Jiang Hai still knew that Ai Dehua should not cheat him, so he first adjusted his mood, swallowed the words that he wanted to refuse, and then nodded to Shenty Clive in front of him. It's my honor. Hearing that Jiang Hai also agreed, Shenty Clive's face looked like she had completed a mission, and she was relieved in an instant. Then she set a time with Jiang Hai. Since he has agreed to let her come, Jiang Hai doesn't care. Tomorrow he may be a little busy because if these fishermen pass the interview, he will come over tomorrow to sign the contract with them. But after the day after tomorrow, there is nothing to do. Hearing Jiang Hai say that the day after tomorrow, Shenty Clive was also very anxious, so she directly set a time for the day after tomorrow. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the day after tomorrow, she will visit Jiang Hai's manor. When Jiang Hai was still a little confused, she had already finished ordering, then she drank the milk and left quickly. As for Karma Cliff next to her, she looked at her sister's appearance and was also a little worried. After apologizing to Jiang Hai, she went out to check on her sister's situation. After the little girl also left, only Ai Dehua, Jiang Hai, and the few people that Ai Dehua brought over were left in front of the bar. Taking advantage of this time, Jiang Hai also looked at the few people standing here. There were a total of 4 people standing in front of Jiang Hai. 4 of them were uncles, 2 were white, 1 was black, and the last one looked like a Latin American. The 4 of them were very strong. While Jiang Hai was looking at them, they were also looking at Jiang Hai. Boss, let me introduce you. This is Tommy Charles, the best sailor in Winthrop apart from me. Haha, I'm just kidding, but he is indeed a good sailor. When he was young, he worked at the Newfoundland fishery and held the record for catching the king of fish for 2 years. He once caught 16 bluefin tunas in George Shallow Bay in 2 months. He is quite famous there. This time it was me who intercepted him. He was originally planning to work at the North Sea fishery in Europe. After Jiang Hai and everyone greeted each other with their eyes, Ai Dehua also introduced them. The first person he introduced was a white man. This white man looked to be around 45 or 46 years old. He was younger than Ai Dehua, but he was as big as him. He was 192 meters tall and his body was particularly big. His skin was white with a hint of reddish black. This was because he often went out to sea and was exposed to the sun. The hair on his head was shaved clean, but he had a brown beard. He looked funny and scary. Compared to Ai Dehua, he was now in the peak state of being a fisherman. His physical fitness was above average and his experience had reached the limit. He was in the best state of being a fisherman. After hearing Ai Dehua's introduction, he immediately reached out his hand to Jiang Hai. He shook hands with Jiang Hai and said, "Nice to meet you." Jiang Hai also shook hands with him. After seeing the two get to know each other, Ai Dehua continued to introduce him. Today's second update should be back on Monday. Let's stop here first. Please support Xiao Fei. Thank you. Chapter 118. This is Eleanor Moses, a legendary sailor in the Gulf of Mexico. He once went into the sea alone to catch a tiger shark. He was known as the Black Conqueror. After introducing Tommy Charles, Edward Anderson introduced the middle-aged black man next to him. This black man looks to be about 50 years old. Although there are no wrinkles on his face, most of the thin curly hair on his scalp has turned white. Compared to the talkative Philip in Jiang Hai's manner, this man is much more serious. When he heard Ai Dehua's introduction, he also stretched out his hand. "Don't listen to him, I was just unlucky. My spear pierced into the body of a tiger shark. As a result, that guy carried me for 50 nautical miles, but fortunately I won in the end." While shaking hands with Jiang Hai, Eleanor Moses said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled. "In any case, this guy caught a tiger shark. This is Andrew Christian, our Captain Jack." Hearing Eleanor's words, Ai Dehua didn't care. He smiled and patted the middle-aged Latino man next to him. "Hello, my name is Andrew Christian Lima, you can call me Andrew." Hearing Ai Dehua's words, the middle-aged Latino man smiled and said to Jiang Hai. According to Ai Dehua, this man is called Andrew Christian. Well, Jiang Hai was too lazy to say the rest of his name. Anyway, this man used to work in the Peruvian fishery in Peru a long time ago. He had quite good skills and it was said that he also owned a boat. Later, it was said that he went to the Caribbean Sea to make a lot of money and immigrated to the United States. So many people call him the lucky Captain Jack. Later, in 2000, because of poor investment, he went bankrupt. Then he went to California, the North Sea fishery, and the Newfoundland fishery. But since there was no fish in Newfoundland, he settled down in Boston by accident. His main income is catching tuna or lobsters every year. Latin Americans were also very hardworking, so although his income was unstable and he could not make much money, he was still able to survive. But this time, when he heard that Jiang Hai wanted to recruit a permanent member, he still came. And because Ai Dehua's skills were very good, he also agreed to let him try. For this opportunity he must seize it. Ai Dehua, the last one, is called Marlon Rupert. He was my colleague in California for 3 years. There is no problem with his skills. Most importantly, he can fly all the boats and planes. Ai Dehua finally introduced a white uncle, but this uncle's height was the shortest among all the people here, only about 1.8 meters. Even Jiang Hai was a lot taller than him. At the same time, although his body was very strong compared to the others, he was thinner. Originally, Jiang Hai was still wondering if this uncle joined because of his strong skills. Now, after listening to Ai Dehua, he understood that this uncle knew how to fly a plane. As a fisherman, it was not a big deal to know how to sail a boat. To be honest, among the 6 crew members that Jiang Hai met, except for Philip who did not know how to sail a boat, the others knew how to sail a boat. Tommy and Eleanor were good at it, and Andrew started his career as a captain. But when it came to flying a plane, it seemed that only Marlon Rupert knew how to do it. Jiang Hai had studied it when he came back today. His current stall was not small. It was time to buy an airplane. Of course, for the time being, he did not need to think about luxury airliners and the like. However, an agricultural plane and a helicopter were still very much needed. But there was a problem. Even if he had these things, no one would know how to fly them. Jiang Hai asked Bell that night. It was obvious that Bell, a Special Forces soldier, had not been taught how to fly an agricultural plane before, so he only had a license to fly a helicopter. He did not have an agricultural plane either. Now that he had recruited Marlon, he could use him as a driver. "Hello." Thinking of this, Jiang Hai immediately shook hands with Marlon. After the few of them got to know each other, they went to find a round table and sat down. They began to talk about recruiting them to Jiang Hai's manor. "To be honest, I pay Uncle Ai Dehua a fixed salary of $1,200 per week, and if there are abundant fish at sea, there will naturally be rewards. Today he just received a reward of $10,000, so I won't treat you badly. You've just come to my manor, so I'll first talk about the issues of money and treatment. As for money, since you're new here, I'll temporarily set it at $1,000 per week. My manor has a small standalone villa for you to live in. You'll have to pay for the monthly water, electricity, and gas costs. I'll pay for the internet, I'll pay for the accommodation, I'll pay for the food, and I'll make sure there's enough beef and fish every day. As for vegetables, it depends on the season and the output of our manor itself. Jiang Hai slowly explained as he looked at the people in front of him. Business was business. Now that he wanted to hire these people and not just ask them to come over for help, he naturally had to make things clear. After hearing that Jiang Hai would give them a weekly salary of $1,000 per week, the eyes of 2 of the 4 people sitting there immediately lit up. They were instantly eager to give it a try. These 2 people were none other than Eleanor Cece and Andrew Christian. Although the United States did not allow racial discrimination on the surface, it was actually everywhere. It was always easier for white people to find jobs, while it was more difficult for other people of color to find jobs. Even if they did find jobs, their wages were lower than white people's. Eleanor Cece and Andrew Christian's situation was similar. These 2 people's standard was no worse than any white sailors, but they always received the least money, especially Andrew Christian. His life was more miserable, so to Tommy and Marlon, a weekly salary of $1,000 was not bad. It was enough to tempt them. They already couldn't wait to join Jiang Hai's manor. That's the main thing. If you're willing, you can go back tonight and prepare. I'll come back tomorrow morning. After signing the contract, you can move into my manor. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai explained the basic terms of the contract to them. Then he looked at the people in front of him and said, "I'm very willing and I have no problem with that." As soon as Jiang Hai's voice fell, Andrew and Eleanor expressed their willingness to go. For them, a stable income of $52,000 a year was quite a wonderful thing. Most importantly, if they went fishing and caught something, they would be given a bonus. They didn't think too much about the bonus. $20,000 a year was enough. $70,000 a year was enough to wake them up laughing in their dreams. I don't have any other questions. Is there a fixed percentage of the bonus? After hesitating for a while, Tommy Charles thought about it and said to Jiang Hai. He was more concerned about this. Basically, it won't exceed 5% of each harvest. Of course, if there are unexpected gains, it'll be calculated separately. But as long as you don't lose money, I'll still give you the bonus. But there's no way to fix it, it mainly depends on my mood. Hearing Tommy Charles's words, Jiang Hai shrugged. He knew that the employment situation in the United States wasn't very optimistic. Basically, many people couldn't find a job in the United States. For example, this Tommy Charles. If it weren't for Jiang Hai's recruitment, he might have gone to Europe. So Jiang Hai didn't paint too big a picture for them. He just said very calmly, "I'm in." Before Tommy Charles could make his stance clear, Marlon Rupert spoke up. "Then I'll join too. Congratulations, boss, you've gained the loyalty of 4 good men." Seeing that Marlon Rupert had agreed, Tommy Charles couldn't say anything else. To be honest, he had only hesitated for a moment. The salary offered by the North Sea was €900 per week, which was equivalent to $988 per week. Most importantly, the prospect of leaving home aside, there was no clear indication of the bonus. At the same time, it was an ocean-going fishing boat. One would have to stay on the boat for a few months. For a few months it was good enough to have instant noodles to eat, let alone beef. There was no way to eat beef. So in general, Jiang Hai's job was much better than in Europe. Originally, before Marlon Rupert agreed, he wanted to see if he could add more. Now that Marlon Rupert had agreed, what else could he say? Naturally, he agreed immediately. Jiang Hai naturally knew what he was thinking. He didn't need a few $100s. But he didn't like his subordinates hiding things from him, so when he saw that Tommy Charles understood so quickly, he chuckled. It was good that he understood. If he hesitated again or said that he would tell Jiang Hai the next day, Jiang Hai might not want him anymore. At worst, he could recruit again. With the current employment situation in the United States, other things were hard to find, but there were plenty of people. Since everyone has agreed, I think you can go back and pack up. Those with families can also bring them to live in the manor. This is also a benefit. The meat and fish they eat will be provided by me for free. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in front of the Winthrop Law Firm. Now that everything had been booked, Jiang Hai chatted with them for a while. At around 8 p.m. Jiang Hai left. Of course, before leaving he also paid the bill. Now that he was a boss who didn't lack money, it didn't matter if his subordinates paid for their drinks. After Jiang Hai left, Ai Dehua naturally had to leave as well. After the two left the bar, Jiang Hai didn't go to sleep in the back seat this time. Instead, he sat in the front passenger seat because he had something to say to Ai Dehua. Of course, it wasn't about the 4 new crew members. To be honest, Jiang Hai was very satisfied with the 4 people. What he didn't understand was why AI de Hua agreed to let Sandy come to his house. Today's update: I only came back last night. Looking at the book review section, it seems like I did not post the wrong chapter. Let me explain about the pond in the book review section. Xiao Fei also knew that tuna were the same as some sharks. They could not stop swimming. Once they stopped swimming, they would die. Therefore, they could not be placed in the reservoir. Generally speaking, when such fish were caught, they would be killed directly and sold as ice. Originally, Xiao Fei also thought the same. But a few days ago, Xiao Fei bought a book about marine fish. Because tuna were very precious, some non-ocean-going fishing boats were designed to open up the two sides of the ship. When the ship sailed, the ocean water would flow in from the front and out from the back. This way there would be a flow of water in the tank of the ship. The fish stored in the tank would need to constantly swim in order to not be washed away by the current. This way the fish that needed to swim could be raised for a short period of time. However, this time was very short, at most 1 or 2 hours. Moreover, the cost was very high. Because the ship needed to be split into 2 halves, the hardness of the hull would be affected. These were all problems that ocean-going fishing boats couldn't do. Xiao Fei didn't write these things in the chapter. If there was any doubt, Xiao Fei would explain it to everyone. Chapter 119. Boss, are you wondering why I directly agreed to let the little girl from the Clive family come to our manor? AI de Hua said to Jiang Hai as he got in the car, started the engine and drove out. In fact, just now he saw that Jiang Hai was puzzled, but he didn't say it clearly. Now he can tell Jiang Hai. Why? Seeing that Edward Anderson was willing to talk, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at him. Speaking of which, although they have only been together for a few months, Jiang Hai still trusts the people in his manor. Especially for the 2 people, Robbins and AI de Hua, who he personally appointed to manage the other cowboys and fishermen. Jiang Hai came to the United States for the first time. If he didn't have a few confidants around him, it would be really difficult. These 2 old men are Jiang Hai's confidants. It is precisely because of this that Jiang Hai didn't ask directly just now. It seems that boss doesn't care much about the recent news. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson smiled and talked to Jiang Hai while driving. Don't you know that Boston was hit by a snow disaster this year? Looking at Jiang Hai, Edward Anderson said with a puzzled look. I know this. I heard that the businessmen in the city also made a fortune because of this. As for what AI de Hua said, Jiang Hai had also seen it in the news. Because Boston was located near the Atlantic Ocean, it was rainy in summer and snowy in winter. This year's winter was the same. The amount of snow in Boston broke the limit of previous years, causing a lot of impact on traffic and so on. From the beginning of the snow in November until now, Boston's snowstorm warning had not been lifted. But for Jiang Hai, a snow disaster is nothing. First, his house is very strong. Second, when it snows, they will always clean up, although the snow on the roadside has accumulated to almost 1.5 meters. However, for Jiang Hai's normal life, the snow disaster did not cause any problems for him. Oh, that's in the urban area of Boston. Winthrop is not so lucky. Several classrooms and gymnasiums in the town's elementary school were crushed by the snow this year. The mayor and the principal of the town's elementary school have been collecting donations for the town's elementary school in recent days, but the effect is not very good. School will start in 10 days and they may be the most anxious now. Edward Anderson shrugged and said slowly after hearing Jiang Hai's words. Jiang Hai seemed to have heard about this news a few days ago, but he forgot about it in the blink of an eye. For a commoner like him, his previous life was to clean the snow in front of his own door and not ask about the frost on the roof of other people's roof. After coming to the United States, he was the same. As long as he was happy, he couldn't be bothered to care about other people and things as long as they cared about him. When it collapsed, it was about the middle of December. Fortunately, the school was already on holiday at that time, so only a few rooms collapsed and there were no casualties. However, for the people in the town, this was not good news. In fact, when it comes to donations, the people of the United States are more generous and active than the people of other countries. Of course, in addition to the problem of the people's hearts, it is also related to the policies of the United States. Donations can be deducted from taxes. And the amount of deduction is very high. Sometimes, $1 can be deducted from $1.15 in taxes. It is precisely because of this that many rich people in the United States have the reputation of being philanthropists. Because not only can this help them become famous and spread the awareness of kindness, but it can also give them enough financial compensation. Logically speaking, there are many rich people in Boston, but these rich people don't need to care about the elementary school in Winthrop. In fact, there are not many rich people in Winthrop. Moreover, the current economic situation is not very good. Just by relying on these ordinary townspeople, $1 and $2 per person, they can only get a few $1,000s in total. They can't even build a classroom, let alone a gymnasium. From this, it can be seen that the people of the United States are conflicted. It is easy for Jiang Hai to say this. When he was in elementary school, the elementary school was very old. During the winter there was no heating and the windows were broken. They used plastic sheets to cover the winter. It was not until he was in 3rd grade that the school was renovated. After the school was renovated, they changed the heating and new glass. But even so, every winter the students still need to use cloth strips and paste from home to cover the cracks of the windows. It was only when he was in junior high school that the windows were made of plastic steel. So, for Jiang Hai, it is nothing to suffer a little in school. But it seems that the people of the United States do not think this way. No matter how hard it is, they can't let the children suffer. This is their education policy. If they want to build something, they will build the best. In the United States, there is no such thing as making do. Then why did you ask her to come here now? Do you want me to donate? Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai nodded and asked strangely. He roughly understood what Ai Dehua meant. He should want him to donate. Whether to donate or not and how much to donate, it is actually up to you, boss. But if you don't even give them a chance to persuade you, it will cause a certain blow to your reputation in the town. To be honest, boss, your reputation in the town is not very good now. Ai Dehua shrugged and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he laughed self-deprecatingly. It seems like this is the case. Other rich people after arriving at a place would benefit the village. However, Jiang Hai didn't seem to have such a practice. Usually he stays in his manor and has no communication with the people in the town. The only communication he had was when he sent more than a dozen bastards in the town to prison and almost destroyed the police station. Although this matter cannot be blamed on Jiang Hai, it is still not enough to make the residents of the town like Jiang Hai. No matter where to invest, it is very important to have a good relationship with the locals. Even in China, some bosses who go to the countryside to build factories need to have a good relationship with the people in the village. Otherwise, it is not a good thing to come and make trouble every 2 or 3 days. What's more, Jiang Hai is still in the United States. Since Jiang Hai came, it seems that for the people of Winthrop, Jiang Hai has not done a good thing. As for the tax on the manor, it is the money collected by the government. It has nothing to do with them. In addition, Jiang Hai's way of doing things is indeed a little bad. This also makes it difficult for Robbins, Ai Dehua, and the others to be sandwiched between Jiang Hai and the residents. But fortunately, although Jiang Hai has not done anything good, he has not done anything bad either. If the maximum favorability value is 100, then Jiang Hai's relationship with the town's residents is 49. It is basically still in a neutral state. There are only a few negative reactions. These negative reactions also came from the families of the bastards who were sent to prison by him. You mean I should do something to change my impression among the town's residents? After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to Edward Anderson. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Dehua shrugged. He was just giving an opinion. What to do is still up to Jiang Hai. Of course, if Jiang Hai wants to fight to the end, maybe they will still stand on Jiang Hai's side. But if they really wait until Jiang Hai and the town's residents are like fire and water, they may choose to side with their families in hometown. At least Jiang Hai is not very confident in his personal charm. Okay, let's wait and see. After thinking about it for a while, Jiang Hai realized that the cost of building a few classrooms wasn't a big deal. The cost of building a classroom was only about $10,000 in the US. A few classrooms and a basketball court wouldn't cost more than $100,000. However, Jiang Hai's current mindset was still the same as before. Let alone $100,000, even if it is only $10, he is not willing to give it to others for no reason. He is also not comfortable. What is his is. Even if he doesn't want it or destroys it, it is still his. No one is allowed to take it away. But if the money is to build a good relationship with the town's residents, to leave a good impression on the government, and most importantly to offset part of the taxes, then Jiang Hai seems to be willing to give it up. Jiang Hai, who has been thinking about this matter, returned home not long after. The next day, after walking Jiang Hai's dog and checking on his horse, he and Ai Dehua drove to town together. Today was the day to sign the contract with the fisherman, and Jiang Hai himself had already made up his mind last night. So today he didn't come here in Ai Dehua's car. Instead, he drove his F-650 into town. Hi, boss. In front of the town's lawyer's office, Jiang Hai saw a row of cars parked there. When Jiang Hai and Ai Dehua's car drove over, the people in these cars jumped out. One or two people looked at Jiang Hai. Needless to say, these people are the fishermen that Jiang Hai saw yesterday. In addition to them, there are also their families. Jiang Hai said that their families can also live in the manor. This is a benefit. Fishermen spend a lot of time at sea all year round, but compared to cowboys, their income is really high. It is even not less than white-collar workers who work in companies. In this world, although money is not omnipotent, it is absolutely impossible to do without money. With money, they also have a relatively stable family. Unlike Robbins and the others, except for Philip, who used to be a sailor who had a wife, the others were either single or divorced. These crew members brought their wives with them. Even if they had children, they would be too embarrassed to bring them along. Today's second update, continuously delivered.